Welcome one and all. It's time for another Old World tournament report. The second featuring the mighty dwarves. And this time, it's an even bigger gun line. Just when you thought there couldn't be any more guns squeezed into a dwarven list, I've managed to squeeze some more in. So, there is the army. And good evening to Forsen down there. If anyone is watching this live, feel free to comment along and I'll refer to your thoughts as we go on. Now, what have the dwarves been struggling with as of late? Mostly big flying things that get into the war machines and eat them, and then they just work their way down the line, eating everything else. And a gun line can't do too much about that once they get in there and start feasting. So, you either get more combat stuff in there to defend your machines, or you go this route, which I've done, which is pile in as many guns as possible. So, we'll go through the list, and we'll also, as we progress through this video, go through the strengths and weaknesses of this kind of dwarf list in 5 games of the old world, and this is the Square-Based GT number 5 from the TSN Arena in Nottingham. So, you'll see the anvil is still in there. And what issues has the anvil been having in my list so far? Well, it keeps dying. So, what have I done to try and keep it alive? Well, I have fitted it with some runes. So, it's got the 2 runes of spell breaking for those auto dispels for enemy wizards that decide that it's a good idea to be within dispel range of the anvil, which might be rare. And then I've also given it a rune of fortitude as well, so that gives it +1 toughness. So, from shooting attacks, that's going to make it toughness 8, and in combat, toughness 6. So that should mean that the kind of units that are going to get into the anvil should have a harder time killing it immediately when they get there. That is the plan with the anvil. The anvil is the general as well. Then we have a BSB, who you'll see perched at the front of the army there, and the BSB does not have anything apart from a shield. So no magical banner at all, and he's most likely going to be going in the 15 hammerers unit, and they are drilled, but they do not have anything on their banner either. So the reason for dropping all of those very expensive runes that were on the hammers before, because I was giving them the rune of confusion and hesitation, so if you charge them you wouldn't get your initiative bonus and you couldn't use any of your special rules, I was finding that just nobody was charging them. So there are a lot of points that couldn't contribute to the game because they're too slow to dictate the action on their own. And other than just putting them behind a war machine, and the kind of thing that can kill a war machine is probably less expensive than a war machine. So certain chaff units will be able to deal with them. And then if the hammerers go forward and kill that, is that the kind of trade I really want? I don't know. So I've kept them as naked as possible, which means, oh yeah, I was giving them the ward save as well. I was giving them the Master Rune of Grungni, so they had a 5-up ward as well. So no one was going near them. So totally naked. We'll see if they actually get to do anything now. Because you have to find the sweet spot, not just in specific units, but in army list building. You have to make the opponent think that there's something they can achieve by attacking you. Otherwise, they just won't. It's the same thing about corner camping. If you're just going to sit in the corner and you've set up the perfect defensive position, no one has a reason to attack you. So why would they? So the hammerers were too good. I kitted them out too well, so just no one touched them. Why would you? So naked, hopefully they get to see some action now. Then we have got an engineer as well with a handgun who is lurking up on the top of that hill there at the back. So ready to help out some of these war machines. In the core section, we have got 16 rangers, and they're fully kitted out with crossbows, great weapons, and shields. So they're mostly going to be deployed in a long line with scout in open order, so that they can all shoot their crossbows, and then when they get charged, if it's not something significant that can kill loads of them, then they're going to hit back with their great weapons and hopefully whomp something to death. That's the plan for them, so we'll see if 16 is enough to get that done. I've picked all the crossbow dwarves that look sufficiently ranger-like, the ones with cloaks in particular. And then the remaining crossbow dwarves have become a unit of 11 quarrelers, and then we've got 12 thunderers as well. They do have standard bearers, the Quarrelers have full command, in fact. So the reason for the Standard Bearers, I found that the kind of thing that often attacks them isn't beating them by that much in combat. So I think having a Standard Bearer, it's worth risking giving up those points to give them a chance at defeating a chaff unit, like a unit of, let's say, 5 Harpies that attacks them. I don't think that's particularly in the Harpies' favour, if there's a Standard Bearer in there, and even a Musician. So I think they can stand up to chaff a lot better, I think, with a Standard Bearer. And I am taking the risk to give away the points for them being killed, obviously, so we'll see if that comes back to bite me in any of the games. Then we've got, in the special section, the 15 Hammerers, of course, who are naked, apart from being drilled and the full command. They don't have any other fancy upgrades, no runes. And we've got 2 cannons. One there and one there. This is the cannon that I've just painted recently, so that goes straight into the tournament list. Let's see, the Warhammer Orchard. Just finished a game versus Dark Elves, on what you've learned from me. Excellent. Did you win? If you're learning from this channel, then maybe you didn't, because I don't think the dwarf win percentage has been that high so far. Although I'm blaming that squarely on the dwarf army list, not on my gameplay. So, 2 cannons, then there's the gyrocopter with the steam gun, so the flame template, keeping it nice and cheap. And then, as we go into... Did I already mention the bolt thrower? That's out there as well. No runes on that. No runes on the cannons. 5 Iron Drakes, 2 units of those, and they only have a Trollhammer torpedo, and then this one also has Cinderblast bombs. So they're going to be useful, particularly for a stand and shoot, perhaps. Then we've got 2 organ guns as well, up there. And no runes on any of the war machines whatsoever, going very, very rune light. The only rune, in fact, outside of the Anvil, who's got a few, is on the Rangers. They've got the rune of Courage, so that they are immune to fear and terror. Because that's the kind of thing that can afflict them when they're out there on their own, probably forward being a speed bump for the enemy, and an enemy monster charging them is what they want, so they really don't want to run away from that situation. So that is the plan for them, to be a speed bump to the big scary stuff. And you can see a lot of guns, so I'm really doubling down on the guns, and my plan, with the 2 cannons coming into the list after recent games where big flyers with loads of saves were giving me serious trouble, because I didn't have the firepower to bring them down, put the 2 cannons in as well. So hopefully that can be a good counter to those, and in situations where there isn't a big flyer, they're also good at taking down things like blocks of heavily armoured infantry, which we may not see too much of, or if they get side on to a unit of 5 knights, for example. Trying to fire through all 5 knights is a very good use of a cannon, because it's got decent AP as well. So, we can see close-ups, including the fancy pants new paint job on this cannon here, which is the Battle for Skull Pass cannon with the telescope from the modern organ gun and cannon plastic kit. And there's the anvil in all its glory. Gyrocopter. Oh, by the way, the gyrocopter's streak of not breaking for over a decade has come to an end, because this little propeller blade at the back there is actually hanging off. It is pinned in there, so it's not going to fall off. But the super glue has finally given way after a decade. So, this is the first scenario. Open battle, and that is the terrain map we've gone for. So, at the square-based events, then you have 3 cards, and you roll off, and whoever loses picks one of the cards to be removed, and then the winner picks one of the remaining 2. So we've ended up with this one. Now this is the only one that is kind of beneficial to both parties. If you're against a dwarf gun line, you obviously don't want hills right in the middle of the battlefield. So that one always gets eliminated by my opponent, and there's another one that has hills halfway into the battlefield, so they're just blocking line of sight, so I'm obviously not going to pick that one. So this is the one we're going to end up with most of the time in open battle, unless my opponent has a specific game plan in mind that involves having their own hill, perhaps. So, you can see that I'm up against the Lizardmen. Wow, wow, wow. So that's interesting. I've not played against them yet. So, I'm going to pull up their list on the little app here. Bringing up the Lizardman list. So, I'll come back and show you my deployment thinking in a minute. Let's have a look. So I think this is where the characters are. So There is a Skink Priest, which is a level 2 wizard on an ancient Stegodon, and it has Engine of the Gods, Talisman of Protection, and Battle Magic. So I think it is that one there. Then there is a Saurus Old Blood on a Carnosaur, which is here. These are all old classic Lizardmen, by the way. So this is the game of the 2 old school armies from the event. I believe most of these are from the 90s. A lot of my dwarves are as well. And some of my dwarves are from multi-generation, actually. So I've got some really old dwarves. I've got some early, mid, and late 90s dwarves. I've got some early 2000s dwarves. And I've got some... When was the last major dwarf release? It was about 2012 or 13-ish. So I've got some from there as well. But all these Lizardmen are quite old school. With the smaller Stegodons, you may recognise these from back in the 90s. Very exciting to see these on the table again. So the Carnosaur with the Saurus Old Blood. That has... Let's see, Armour of Meteoric Iron, which I think is the one that can't be reduced. So that's a good one to have. Oh, I believe we've got the Polish Andy in the chat there. Got Visibly Riley in there as well. And we have got, in core units, before we get to the other stegs, we've got 16 Saurus Warriors, which are down there. I think those are the only Sauruses in the list. So there are some Saurus Warriors. I think there's some more hanging out the back of the unit there. But they've gone into marching column, which is why they don't quite fit onto their tray at the moment. We have got... How many units of Skink Skirmishers have we got? We've got 5 units of 10. So all the way across the battlefield we've got Skink Skirmishers. And they are armed with javelins. So short range shooting on them. Special units, we've got these 3 Croxigor, who I found out can conveniently charge through their own skirmish units. So they can charge through the Skinks, which is cool. It used to be that the Croxigor would just go in the block with the Skinks, and that was always something really cool to see. I don't know whether that's still a thing or not. And then we've got, let's see, 3 Pterodon Riders. So they've got javelins, and they can also drop rocks on you as well. There is an Ancient Stegodon, which is one of these 2. Let's see, which one's got the big bow on it. So I think it's this one that's the Ancient Stegodon. This one has Engine of the Gods and Skink Crew with javelins, and this one's got a giant bow on it. So that is the regular Stegodon with javelins and a giant bow. So you can see all of them are bunched into this corner. And if we look back at the wide shot and look at where my war machines are. So because I am not many drops, let's see, how many am I? Because all war machines have to go down together, which means I am 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for war machines, 8 for heroes, and then the scouts go down later. So 8 drops, which is not a lot, because all the war machines, all 5 of them go down at once. So that means my opponent can put down crummy units like Skinks first, and I have to deploy my war machines, and I can't bunch them all up in the same place, because then my opponent would just put all the big lizards on the other side. So I have to spread them out a bit. So the organ guns being in the middle, so they've got shorter range than some of the others, so they can cover quite a wide area. And they've got a lot of shots, so if they end up having to shoot at skirmishers, I can probably live with that. They should be able to kill some regardless. And a cannon on the hill, so it's got a good view across the battlefield. A bolt thrower with a good view across the battlefield as well, because the things I want to be shooting are large targets, so I don't worry about my war machines being behind my lines a bit. Got a cannon down here, so that's got a decent view around as well. Organ guns covering this area. The anvil in the centre, because again, no idea where the enemy wizards are going to be when it gets deployed, because there's so many drops to go down. How many is in this army? So there are 5 skink units. And then 1, 2, 3 other units before even getting to the Stegodons. So they've deployed behind this big piece of terrain that I can't see them over. Gyrocopter's made a vanguard move up there, and my rangers are on this flank here, because I felt, you know what, I could put them there, and I could shoot some stuff in the first turn, but the problem is, there are 3 giant monsters there. So not only would they get charged by 1, they'd get charged by 3, and probably all die before they get to attack. So I didn't think that was a good use of their resources, so instead I'm going to use them to try and dominate this flank by killing this unit of skinks, and then hopefully defeating the Saurus warriors as well. I've got my hammerers in the middle because obviously they had to go down before I knew where anything else was going. So I think the Rangers can hold down this flank pretty well on their own. I'm not too worried about that Saurus unit. I think the Rangers can take them. So the hammerers are most likely going to start heading this way to where they're likely to be needed, because there are 3 Stegodons and a Carnosaur coming this way. So we'll see if this pays off anyway, this deployment strategy. We've got some nice cinematic over-the-shoulder shots of the dwarves there, including those delightful year 2000 mould lines that I never removed because I was young. And I get the first turn, so I'm going to start blasting. The Rangers blast off about half the skinks, which is a good start. The bolt thrower can actually shoot at them as well because they're on a hill, so I can see over my own guys in that case. And the Iron Drakes, okay, so this is quite funny then. The Iron Drakes, I forgot that the woods they started in were dangerous terrain. So I moved immediately out of it so they could shoot something, and 2 of them died instantly. So, yes, don't forget that dangerous terrain exists. I mean, on average, you shouldn't be losing 2 in a unit of 5, but it can happen. You can see that the anvil has buffed up the armour of these Iron Drakes, because I feel like they're going to get shot with some javelins. So it's gone off on the lower power, which is why I've put the skull symbol up, and it has the swirly symbol up if I get the super powered one, which is +1 to armour and reroll. So this skull is just rerolls. Gyrocopter's moved up out of sight of all the stegs because it doesn't want to be charged, and with more shooting from war machines, kill off a load more skinks, making a dent in them, but they're cold-blooded, so it's quite difficult to actually make them break and panic. And then this Stegodon takes some wounds as well. This is the ancient Stegodon with the great bow. Gyro is hiding, and that's it. Limited what I could do in the first round because the big stuff's hiding, so I had to settle for killing a lot of skinks. So hopefully they have to come out and play now, and then I can start blasting again. So turn 1 for the lizards, and there is a full-on advance here. And you may notice that the Rangers... Oh, the Rangers are on the other side. You may notice that there is a full-on advance of Stegodons here, but not as fast as they could possibly go. That's because they are, again, avoiding shots from some of these war machines. So the Carnosaur is quite happy to take the shots instead, because the Carnosaur has that armour that you can't reduce. So that's why that is blocking up line of sight from like the organ gun. So the Stegodons are more fragile, so they are hiding a bit still. The Kroxigor are also hiding behind screens, and here's an interesting thing that's going to come up as well. So if the Kroxigor charge through the skinks, when you make the stand and shoot reaction, the Kroxigor are technically in hard cover when they do that because there are units in front of them. So that makes the stand and shoot way less effective against them, which is interesting. So the Pterodons swooping down here as well, they're probably going to charge a war machine. I'm definitely not going to be able to kill all of this, so I'm going to have to pick my targets carefully next turn and decide what I want to be wounded out of this bunch here. On the other side, on the side of the Rangers, the Sauruses actually retreat a bit behind the hill, because they're thinking, you know what, I think they agree with me, this flank looks terrible for the Lizardmen. Focus all their energy over here where the big stuff is. Don't even bother participating in this flank because they're not going to end well. Their fate is not going to go in their favour. So, because as soon as they walk off the hill and come forward a bit, my Thunderers shoot them, I've got organ guns, all kinds of stuff. So they wouldn't have a good time. So good job staying there for now. And then there's a spell that goes off that allows the Pterodons to move again, so they just swoop down here. So I did warn my opponent though, of course, that the cannon does have the grape shot ability, so it can just blast them at point blank range if need be. And there we go, we've got lots of threats coming in. Not that close yet, so the main thing is obviously the Carnosaur, so we're going to try and shoot that down, and the Kroxigor are big threats as well. So, onto my turn 2. We're going to start blasting again. The Rangers kill even more skinks, who had edged sideways into these woods, by the way, so they get cover, and killed a few of them. The Thunderers move up, and they don't add to the tally of dead skinks, sadly. The organ guns, or the anvil buffs up. I think it puts down the immune to psychology rune this time, which means that if the big scary terror-causing enemy units charge into something, they don't have to worry about that. So that's the reason for that being put down now. The hammerers have redressed their ranks, and then started heading in this direction. Killed a few skinks, killed a Croxigore and wounded that one with my shooting as well. And the grape shot killed all but one of these pterodons. The Carnosaur, I do some shooting at him as well, but I don't think I get a lot of wounds through. I think he's got 6 remaining by the look of that dice there. So I do get some wounds in on him though. And the gyrocopter moved over here just to have a go at flaming them. And I don't know if it did that much. It may have killed a skink. So not a lot accomplished over here. Some wounds done to the Carnosaur, but not a huge amount, which is sad. But this flank is definitely looking closed off, and those Sauruses might just want to stay there for the whole game now. That's what I'm thinking at this point, because they're too slow to move up and wipe this lot out. So all they'll be doing is walking forward to their doom, I think. So this side is where the money is for the Lizardmen. So, in the Lizardman turn, the Croxigore declares a charge against the Iron Drakes, who manage to kill one of them despite the hard cover, and then it fails its charge as well, just for an added insult. The Pterodon charges into the cannon. The Carnosaur also gets to the cannon, but it's a very heavy metal model, so we've not tried to rest it on the hill. And I think that's it for the charges. Javelins are being thrown left and right, trying to take out Iron Drakes, and you can see one of them's actually fallen from that unit. And the other skinks just move up as a screen to block line of sight a little bit, and to block... Well, they're not blocking line of sight that amazingly, of course, because these are large targets behind them, so they won't have to worry, but the Croxigore obviously will get cover, unless it's these Quarrelers shooting at him, which is what I'm thinking at the moment. Quarreler's probably going to shoot Croxy. The Saurus unit just go extra wide, they do a bit of a reform and stay behind the hill. So if they do decide to come out, they'll be in more of a fighting shape. And the cannon takes a wound. I think it's from the poison javelins of the skinks. And some more Iron Drakes go down, so there's only a Trollhammer torpedo left in this unit now. So the skinks aren't charging anyone, they're just peppering them with javelins. And then the Skink Priest. Well, the Skink Priest tried to do some wounds, but I think those are my armor saves. So I think it was a magic missile that targeted the Quarrelers, I think, and those are the saves. So, very nice. The cannon obviously gets killed by the Carnosaur and the Pterodon, and then they turn around to face the big threat, which is my shooting, and now I have to deal with them. So we're one cannon down, and haven't done that much with my own shooting yet. So on to my turn 3. The Rangers just swivel round a bit, wheel a bit. It's not that significant a move, because obviously they're so wide. This end just goes bloop. Just because if there's going to be nothing to fight here, if the Saurus unit's going to hide, then they can maybe eventually swing round even further and contribute something to the middle of the table. The Thunderers move a bit as well, and with some shooting take out some more skinks. The Anvil puts down the immune psychology rune again, and look at that, the Carnosaur takes some serious wounds, so that's down to 3 wounds. I think the Anvil helps out with shooting at that, and possibly one of the organ guns as well. This Stegodon is now down to 2 wounds, so more shooting into that one. And I think that Stegodon took damage from the cannon, possibly. And I think I fired at this dude with the Anvil and the organ gun, which whittled its wounds down. This one fired at something over here, probably the skinks. And we're whittling them down, but it's very difficult to make them break. The Croxigore takes some wounds from the Quarrelers as well. And the Gyrocopter, dropping a flame template, takes out more from this unit. And that was a bit better shooting-wise, got some good wounds in, and whittling them down. Then we get into the Lizardman turn. And I'm not sure if I've been doing this before, but apparently war machines can actually flee. So there's nothing in the rules that says war machines can't flee. Now, the Anvil of Doom has the immovable object special rule, which means that it can't make moves in the remaining moves subphase. So technically the Anvil can flee as well. And I'm thinking war machines can actually move in this edition of Warhammer, which is something I've just assumed couldn't happen because they don't have a move characteristic, but the crew, presumably, just push it along 3 inches a turn if they want, And then when they flee, you can go 1,000,000,000 inches if you've got your own units in the way. They just keep bouncing through them. So they've fled from charges that were coming in, the engineer and the organ gun. So they've ended up over here. So look where they were. Let's see. So this organ gun fled, because previously it was there. And it was fleeing from... maybe from him or the pterodon. I think it was the pterodon, and then the engineer was fleeing from the carnosaur. So the engineer ends up here. The organ gun flees, and because it can't land on top of one of my units, you do actually bounce through your own units when fleeing, so it ends up there. Which is really weird. I don't know if I agree with the way this rule's been put together. It's very silly. If you've got a long line of an army and someone charges in the flank and you flee, you teleport all the way across the table. Which happened in a previous event with my hammerers, and on this one, it's happening with war machines, which is even more ridiculous, and obviously they have to take a dangerous terrain test. And they do lose one crew member as a result of that. But that means that they're safe for now, but they will have to rally next turn, which means that they won't be able to shoot because they count as moving. The pterodon redirects its charge into this cannon, and the carnosaur redirects into the quarrelers. Now, charging something you don't really care that much about, like an engineer, and seeing if it'll flee and then redirecting into another unit is a good way to avoid stand and shoot, by the way. It wouldn't be an issue here because he's charging in the rear. But in general, if your opponent is charging you, and they don't charge the unit that shoots, they charge another unit that isn't really that significant, then maybe reconsider fleeing. Because if you flee, they can then redirect the charge into a shooting unit and you can't stand and shoot. Because at that point, then the charge reaction phase is over. Visibly Riley says, war machines can flee as they have a rule saying -1 to flee rolls. Yep. So yep, war machines can flee and they can flee very fast. Stephen says, do not just lose the war machine. So the machine is lost if it breaks, but not if it flees. So it can make flee moves, and technically fall back in good order is considered a flee move as well. So it can do that. But if it breaks in combat, so if it fully fails its leadership test, then it will break and it's just immediately destroyed. You don't have to pursue it. It's just destroyed because the crew just abandon the machine and run for the hills. But if they're fleeing from an enemy charge, they wheel that cannon expertly around other machines, and I don't know how it's supposed to work, but that's how it is. That's how it works in the rules. I don't understand, but we have to accept it. These are the rules. Proxigor makes it into the Iron Drakes and survives their stand and shoot. And mostly the Skinks are just spreading out and they're going to do some more shooting. So funneling around the lone Iron Drake and throwing their javelins about the place. And more of them getting up onto the hill, so surrounded by Skinks now. All three of the Stegs are now in prime position to attack, which is fairly terrifying. And let's see what the shooting does. Well, the gyrocopter, you may notice, is there. It's now dead. So, the Stegodon, javelins, and the Skinks, all that stuff manages to murder them. The Iron Drakes fall back in good order from the Croxigor, and it chooses not to follow them. So I think the reason for that is because it wants to try and obstruct the hammerers, possibly, from getting through to the Stegodons. I'm not even sure if I could make that charge, but maybe it wants to block line of sight from something, I don't know. But I think it declines the pursuit after them, after they fall back. Carnosaur annihilates the Quarrelers. And one is left, actually. So he flees. He flees through the enemy units, survives fleeing through them, and ends up there in front of the Stegodons. So he is fleeing. So if you flee through an enemy unit, then it's on a 1, 2, or a 3 you take a wound. It's like a dangerous terrain test, but it's way more likely to actually kill you. So he is there. So he's probably not going to last much longer. And this cannon, which is now there, presumably that is because... okay, I remember what happened here. So, if we go back and look at the cannon in combat. So, the cannon's in combat with the pterodon. The cannon defeats the pterodon in combat by wounding it. And then it flees, and the cannon pursues it and catches it. And because the cannon doesn't run off the table, it can just stop there. And yeah, it's just going to be able to shoot again. So the War Machine rules are very weird. Because if you flee, you then have to rally, which means you can't shoot. If you pursue, then you're free to just shoot willy-nilly, even though you've just chased down a pterodon, chased it down, beat it to death with your barrel swabbing stick, and then immediately you're ready to just fire the cannon from that spot. One of them's dragging the cannon along really fast to pursue them as well. So yeah, hilarious. You can't shoot with the War Machine after rallying because the counter's moving. So if you've got a War Machine that's not move or fire, then you can. But most War Machines are move or fire. So if we look at, as an example, the move or shoot, it's called. So the cannon. Yeah, they can't if they rally. There's probably some War Machines out there that don't have that rule. I haven't looked at every single one in the game, but the organ gun is the same. Let's have a look at the bolt thrower. Yep, same thing. So I imagine most of them are like that. But if you pursue a unit, then you can shoot afterwards, because that's not a flee. That's not fleeing, so you don't have to rally. Okay, moving on to my turn 4. So from this position, what am I going to do now? The hammers are going to try and charge the Croxigor, and if it flees away from them, they can always try and redirect the charge into some skinks and kill them. And then I'm going to blast everything I've got into the Stegodons and the Carnosaur and try and kill some of them. But you also notice that the Saurus unit moved up onto the hill as well, so I'm going to be able to shoot them now. So the Rangers whittle them down a little bit, take out a couple from there, and the Thunderers and the Bolt Thrower firing as well. Kill off a small number of skinks, I think. Managed to kill a Stegodon, which is the... I think it's the ancient Stegodon with the bow that gets killed, which was here. And also the Carnosaur is still on 3 wounds, so I don't think I've done much to that yet. So 1 Stegodon down, the Croxigor fled, and the Hammerers decided that they were just going to go extra wide because they're about to be charged, and then they would continue the attempted charge against the Croxigor, but they barely went any distance anyway. I find whenever I charge the Hammerers, I tend to roll a double 2 on the dice, which means they make a 5-inch charge. So they do not get very far with their charges at all. So they're just lined up, waiting to be hit by some Stegs and maybe a Carnosaur as well. And they're so wide that if they only get hit by 1 monster, it would be bad news for that monster. If they get hit by 2 or 3, it gets a bit dicier for them. They may well lose the whole front rank. So it's a bit of a risk. But that means things aren't chasing after my War Machines on my anvil, which is good. So this cannon... I think this cannon contributed to some of the murder. And then into the Lizard's turn. So the Iron Drakes are being charged by the Carnosaur. The 2 Stegs are charging into the Hammerers. And the Skinks are charging into this Quarreler champion who is still fleeing, and surely they're going to catch him now. So my Iron Drakes flee, and they end up behind the Hammerers. The Skinks catch the Quarreler. The Carnosaur redirects its charge into the Hammerers. One of the Stegodons makes it in, the other one doesn't roll high enough. So, what I could have done, if we go back, rather than fleeing with the Iron Drakes, my thought was, if I flee, I might bounce through the Hammerers, and this guy's so far away from them that he may well fail that charge. But he just rolled high enough to get to them. Because if I wanted to really protect the Hammerers, then I could have stayed where I was and got hit there, and then hope the overrun wasn't sufficient to reach the Hammerers. But as it is, they end up there, and we get 2 monsters to the face. So let's see how that goes. Let's see. Obscure Emanator says, I'm really hoping for a few shiny new engineering runes, the Dwarf Arcane Journal, personally missing Rune of Accuracy. Yeah, there's not a lot of engineering runes, so I feel like that's something they could definitely add. The War Machines just need something, I think. Well, we'll see how they do in the rest of these games, but in general, the consensus seems to be that they are lacking a bit in this edition. They don't do the job reliably enough. And +1 to hit would be amazing, yes, if you could stick that on a bolt thrower, for example. That would make it much more exciting. And or give engineer that ability. Yeah, the engineer, not much purpose of him with bolt throwers. All he can do, I think he can let them re-roll a 1 to hit if they happen to roll that, but they're usually hitting on 5s because they're at long range anyway. So, yeah, they do need more for the war machines. You don't want to make them too overpowered, but I think they've taken them too far down. So, we have got some skinks surrounding the organ gun, ready to throw their javelins. And if I was the skinks, I would have just been tempted to charge organ guns rather than throwing javelins at them, because at least you're tying them up then as well. They're just hoping for the poison attacks that successfully wound, and they actually do kill this one. So it works out there. Orchard thinks dwarf cannons should be 85 points, not 100. That sounds quite fair. I think 100 points is a lot when you consider it's D3 wounds. So on average, if you jump through all the hoops, you get 2 wounds on something. So it really means that the big monsters are not the thing you want to be shooting at, because they've often got 2 or 3 different saves. So after you roll the artillery dice to get it in the right spot, and then you roll the bounce, that's 2 dice rolls already. Then you've got to roll to wound, and generally not roll at a 1. Then they've got to make 1 save, but they'll probably get an armor save because it's only AP 2, unless you get a 6. Then they've probably got a ward save or a regen save as well. So there's so many hoops you have to jump through with a cannon. For 100 points, it feels like a lot. So it's really better suited to shooting out cavalry units from the flank, so you can hit all 5 of them. Yeah, so that is their role. They're not monster snipers like they used to be. So this cannon survives all the skinks. It's only got 1 wound left though. The Carnosaur and the Steg kill a load of hammerers. The hammerers then fall back in good order because they're stubborn, and they do not get pursued into. So we've got an interesting situation here now, because we're going into my turn, and the hammerers have the opportunity to charge something, but there's only 3 of them left. Orchard says, I really like the nerfs to shooting because people don't hate your guts for playing. That is true, actually. People do have a lot more fun playing against dwarves when their big monster that they spent hours and hours painting isn't deleted before it gets a chance to move. Points adjustment would be good. I think instead of just making them more powerful, make them balanced in the points cost and limit how many you can take, so that they feel good to use, but they don't feel too powerful to face. You have to find the balance with units, especially ones that can hit you from all the way across the table. Like, does it feel good to use? Does it feel not too bad to have someone use it against you? You want to land somewhere in the middle. And is there something the opponent can do about it? Yes, they can be in cover. They can have ward saves. They can put units behind other units that might be able to block cannonballs. It's not like the Terrorgeist Scream, where all they have to do is get in position within range of you, and then it's just a single dice roll to see if you die or not. So I think there's enough hoops that war machines have to jump through that you could give them a little bit of something. Whether that's a points drop, I would accept a little points drop. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Okay, turn 5 for me. So the cannon is, I think I attempt a grape shot into all these skinks. Those dice don't look too hot there, but I don't think they're actually relevant to what's going on here. Then you'll notice that this Stegodon has taken some damage. In fact, I think one of them is just dead. So yeah, the organ gun blasted down one of them. The hammerers charge into the Carnosaur and do wounds to it. And yeah, that's pretty cool. So there was a challenge, I think, that was issued by the Hammerer Champion, which then led to a wound being done to the Carnosaur. So the Hammerers realise that if they don't charge a monster, they're going to die, because they've all got javelins, and there's a spellcaster as well, who is... or is he dead now? I think it might be this one, actually. So there is a spellcaster there. So they're going to get fireballed off the table anyway. So they might as well charge something and try and do something before they die, because they're going to die regardless. So all my shooting, I kill some more skinks, and then combat resolution, the hammerers have been defeated by the looks of it there, but they're sticking around for the time being. And you can see I think we're into the next turn here. So, the Saurus unit have decided they're going to really get in the face of the Rangers. We'll see how wise that is, but they're really getting in there, so there is going to be... Hold on, did they actually charge them? Were they already fighting them? Yeah, they were already fighting them, there was just no picture. So, yeah, there's the picture there. So the Sauruses do charge into the Rangers. And the combat resolution, they do win. And let's go forward to that. So I think in the next round though, because they give ground, so they stop at the terrain, and then the Sauruses went into them, and then the next round after that, the Rangers defeated the Saurus unit and pushed them back, and didn't go far enough to get back into combat with them. You can see that this Stegodon is chasing down this final Iron Drake who is fleeing for his life because he's trying to hold on to his points. And the Skinks are still trying to destroy the war machines. These ones are still having to go at this cannon as well. Warhammer Orchard. I tried putting the axes on the Rangers and I really recommend it just in situations like that. Interesting. So yeah, with Rangers you do have quite a lot of options for throwing axes. So yeah, they do have quick shots, don't they? Axes. So yeah, 1 point per model. You can take them in addition to crossbows, can't you? So yeah, that might be worth doing for a really close range stand and shoot. Yeah, I might well do that as well. That sounds like a good idea. Yeah, I'll definitely consider that because it's not very expensive. So the cannon does get killed by the Skinks at this point, and the organ gun takes a wound. And this combat is still going. This combat is still going. We're whittling each other down. There's only 4 Rangers left and only 6 Sauruses. So that's been a bloodbath. The Saurus unit wins, push the Rangers back again. Carnosaur down to its final wound against the Hammerers. And you can see then that the Hammerers do get defeated. The Carnosaur runs them down, eats them for dinner, and they're dead. But the Carnosaur is on 1 wound, and I've got an organ gun and an anvil ready to shoot. And I've also got a bolt thrower as well that can see it because it's a large target. So let's see if I can kill some more monsters in turn 6 and get those sweet, sweet points. So the Rangers charge back into or fight the Saurus unit again, defeat them, and then mow them down. So this big expensive Saurus unit has been killed by the Rangers, which is great. Then you can see human hand there as well. The bolt thrower and the organ gun and the anvil have a go at shooting stuff. And they murder the Carnosaur, which is good, more points there. And then I tried to kill some Skinks, but unsuccessfully. And in their turn, the Skinks just surround and take out another organ gun. And can't quite hunt down the last Iron Drake yet. And yeah, there we go. So that's what's alive at the end of the game. So we're going to tally up. So I've got some Rangers, I've got the Bolt Thrower, the Thunderers, and the Anvil. My opponent's got a couple of Stegs and a load of Skinks. So at the end of the game, let me pull up the result here. So I killed, it actually tells you on this app how many points you killed. So I gained 1,329 points. So this is already including banners and such. And my opponent got 1,392. The threshold for a win is 100 points, so obviously that is a draw. So it's just 10-10. And that felt about right based on how much stuff got killed. So, had my opponent done what I thought was going to happen, which was the Sauruses were going to stay hidden for the entire game, obviously they wouldn't have died. So whether that means the Rangers would have made it over here and been able to shoot down a Stegodon, I don't know. But if they didn't, then that would have meant the Lizardmen would have had enough for a win. Obviously, if I'd killed off one or more of the big monsters a little bit earlier, that would have swung it towards me as well. So, yep, definitely a draw. You can't get much closer than that. Into the next round, which is the Mountain Pass. And this one, you've got long deployment. So you might think that's great for dwarves because of the long-range war machines, but if you go too far back, then there's just a chance that you're going to be out of range for a start. With an organ gun, for example, it's only 30 inches, so you don't have to go right up to the front. But if you go too far back, there's greater risk of you fleeing off the table as well if something terrible happens to you. So you can't flee off the sides in the mountain pass, only off the back edge. So I do deploy quite far forward because I want to make use of this hill and the woods as well. If I deploy right at the back, then the enemy can use these woods as cover. So I want to deny them that possibility by going quite far forward in my deployment zone. So Orchard is finding dwarves more exciting than ever to play because they're not so straightforward as before. You really grit your teeth playing them, it feels right. Yes. The play style feels okay. I think they feel a little bit weaker than the other factions, although maybe there's some trick that we just haven't found with them yet. So, up against Brettonians. So the first time I've played them as well. Let me pull up that list on here. And cracking open the Brettonian list. So there is a Duke on a Hippogriff, which is, I think that's the orange one, which is there. That one has a falcon horn of Friedmund and the Sword of Heroes. There is a Baron who is on a Royal Pegasus, which is this one, I think, that one there. So that has Virtue of Heroism and the Grail Vow. So there are lots of these units that, if my opponent foregoes the first turn roll, can get a ward save in the first turn and just accept they're going second. So my opponent does take that up. There is also Lady Elise Duchard, or Ducard, and she is over there. That's the new special character that they just released the model for, which is a very cool model, who is a level 3 caster, but I think dispels on level 4, which is quite nice. And there are 2 units of 24 men-at-arms, one there and one there. And they have the standard commands. There are 2 units of 10 peasant bowmen in skirmish formation, one in the woods, one on the hill, in front of the trebuchet. And knights, there are 6 mounted knights of the realm, which is the unit out on the flank there, in the lance formation. And they have lances, shields, heavy armour. In rare, we've got the trebuchet, we've got the Grail Knights, so very exciting unit there. 294 points, and they've got full command. So they're the scary unit, really. However, the issue with knights, that is the perfect unit for my army to murder, I think. Because they only have 1 wound each, so every armor save I can make them fail, one of them is just dead. And obviously they may get a ward save on top of that, but they don't have regeneration as well, and it's just the 1 wound, so it's 6 wounds in the entire unit. And for every 1 that dies, that reduces their power. Whereas with a big monster, every wound you do usually doesn't reduce their power. There are certain monsters that are an exception to that. But generally, monsters keep their full hitting power until you kill them. So knights are what I want to see, really, because cannons can blast through multiple knights. Organ guns are going to be wounding them on, I think, Grail Knights might be toughness 4, so 3s against them. And yeah, bolt throwers good as well against knights with its really high AP. So knights are not ideal against this gun line. The stuff that is ideal is the flying stuff, because we've also got 3 Pegasus knights as well. And I think they're the only unit that's in special in this list. So they obviously fly, and they'll be a threat to any of my war machines. So we've put the Rangers out in front against the Flyers, hoping that they'll charge me, because they don't have a lot of attacks. So I feel like I could do a good job whomping them with great weapons, and surely all 3 of them aren't going to successfully charge me in 1 turn. You'd think maybe 2 of them will make it in, 1 of them will probably have a below average roll. Then I've got my gyrocopter out on this side as well, and I don't really have a particular target in mind for the gyrocopter, but if I could get it all the way over the top and maybe start scorching some peasant bowmen with its steam gun, that would be nice, and then maybe charge a trebuchet with it. Could be another good use for it. So we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to rush it out there and get it charged immediately. Organ gun in the woods, so I've got a good view here. The only large target is actually this guy, which is the Duke on the Hippogriff. There we go. So that's the only large target, I think. But there are units on hills as well, so obviously I can see them over the other troops. So organ gun has got a target there, cannon has got a target as well, and I've set it up so that I can shoot wide as well, so that when they start moving up I can blast through them with the cannon. Same for this cannon from that angle, and the bolt thrower on the hill has got a good view from up there. Quarrelers on the hill, Thunderers in front of the hill because they've got shorter range, so you want them to be a bit closer. The Iron Drakes in front of the Hammerers, or the Iron Drakes actually either side of the Hammerers. The Hammerers have started 5 wide, or 6 it may be. I think it's 6. Because they're drilled, obviously they can change their formation before they charge anyway. Or redress their ranks before they charge, should I say. So I'm not worried about blocking the Anvil's line of sight with the Iron Drakes because they're going to move up anyway to shoot. And I'm definitely going to be going first because my opponent's going to give that away to get the ward save. And there is my setup. The engineer is back here behind the Iron Drakes there. And some bowmen. I like the paint jobs on this Brettonian army. I don't know if I've got any close-ups here, but I did take some close-ups during lunchtime on day 2, so you'll be able to see the paint work on them because they are very impressive. So, turn 1 for me, and my opponent has some large dice there, which kindly are donated to use as the turn dice for this game. And moving up and blasting away. Down with 3 Grail Knights immediately. So yeah, that's a very good hard-hitting unit that's just been taken and down to 50% immediately. The shooting on this side knocks out a couple of Knights of the Realm. And put a wound, I think is it 7 wounds it starts off with the Hippogriff? So I've put a wound at least on him with my shooting as well. Killed 1 man-at-arms. And yeah, the stuff I think I can kill, which is Knights, are being whittled down already. So I'm confident they will both be dead before they get to my lines. It's the flying stuff I'm more concerned about. Because I can normally hone in on some targets that I think I can kill and get rid of those, but the flying stuff starts munching through my lines and then we end up with a really close score at the end rather than a landslide. So we'll see if that pans out here as well. Turn 1 for the Brettonians. So the Grail Knights, they get, I think they get an extra save put on them or something with that. I think it's a 5-up regeneration, possibly. I think that's from a spell. Some charges are made against the Rangers, who do a bit of standing and shooting, and actually do a couple of wounds to this guy, I think. Makes it in. The Pegasus Knights make it in as well. In fact, all of them do. All the flyers are into the Rangers, which is bad news, because I may well lose lots of them here. You can see the Rangers also got their armor save re-rollable, courtesy of the Anvil. And we're going to take a little quick pause there for a second, which I may well go and edit out of the video later. So I'll be back in about 2 minutes, hopefully. So don't go anywhere. And we are back. So let's see what people have been saying the last couple of minutes. Falcon Horn, one of the best items in the game. Turn off enemy flying, but no real use against you. Yes, so it does kind of have a use because the gyrocopter is around. And Gilthos is the 5 gyrocopter trick. I know I sound like a broken record, trying to contribute more to the gyrocopter fund, but I can't remember my damn password. Well, the gyrocopter fund is coming along. I would definitely like to own at least one of the modern plastic gyrocopters, and probably the ye olde early 90s gyrocopter as well, so I would have 3, which I think is a reasonable number to put into an army. I think that would be fair, and they would all look nice and different from each other as well. And yes, Elise, it auto-dispels if she rolls a double, so yes, great anti-magic, yes, very good. She's just better than a regular caster, which is kind of what you should have from a special character, isn't it? So she's very good. The Knights getting into position to charge next turn into the Thunderers. Yeah, so if I don't bring down the Knights this turn, they will be able to charge me, but I'm confident I will be able to bring them down in my next turn. The Trebuchet. It was aiming for, I think, the organ gun, but it scattered and didn't kill anyone. I think it got some partial hits on the Iron Drakes, but didn't kill any of them. Magical Vortex is plopped down onto the battlefield. And there it is. Woohoo, it's a Vortex. And let's see what happens as a result of this combat then. So the Rangers take some casualties. They do some wounds back, but the Rangers are down by 5. And yeah, they die. So you can see that the Flyers have moved forwards significantly because they ran down the Rangers who fled after losing the combat by a decent amount. And into my turn 2. I'm moving my Iron Drakes quite a bit here because I want to open up firing lanes. So normally you don't see them moving this much. But I'm trying to create a path to the units I want to shoot for my war machines. And this thing, I believe, blocks line of sight. This vortex that was planted there. So that's an issue as well. So you will see that loads of men-at-arms get killed from this unit in this turn. The Knights of the Realm get killed as well from the shooting over on this side. The Thunderers and the Bolt Thrower. These men-at-arms take massive casualties from the things that targeted them. I think that may have been the Quarrelers on the hill shot at them and did a really good job. And the organ guns blast away into these heroes. And yeah, you can see they're still quite healthy though. They've got a few wounds left. And all the Knights are dead. So the Grail Knights get killed as well. I think one organ gun maybe had a shot at them. Or the Iron Drakes maybe killed them, because you can see them here. So I think the organ guns were able to focus their fire elsewhere. But it's looking pretty good at the moment. Killed all the Knights, wounded these 2, but we have lost the Rangers, and the flying stuff is now into the meat, which is when the mass dwarf casualties usually start. So let's see what happens now. Turn 2 for the Brettonians. Look at the corpse pile. It's piling up. So, the Pegasus Knights chase down the gyrocopter. I think I flee from their charge, but they actually catch it anyway and therefore kill it over here. And the Duke on the Hippogriff and the other one on the Royal Pegasus go into the 2 war machines here. The men-at-arms are shielding Lady Elise. And the Trebuchet fires again, scatters onto the Hammerers, or scatters away somewhere around the Hammerers, but doesn't do much. The Hippogriff, it doesn't kill off the war machine entirely, and because it's stubborn, it can just fall back in good order. So it's tying up the Duke for a little while. The cannon over here does not fare so well, and that is dead. So, then the Overrun takes it up to this building here. And this one is not a large target, by the way, the Royal Pegasus, so that I can't shoot that if I can't see it past the organ gun. So, I'm not worried about the men-at-arms, and they're about to get shot to bits, frankly. Turn 3 for me. So, blasting away at the men-at-arms, this unit takes enough casualties to run away, But actually, the amount that has been lost from the unit, I think they should have just fallen back in good order instead, rather than a full flee. Let me know if that's correct, but I think it is. We do correct it later, because they continue fleeing, and then I then remembered, wait a minute, shouldn't they just have fallen back in good order? So we actually just auto-rally them when they get here later on, because I remembered that I think that is the way it works. Because if you're below 50%, then you only fall back in good order from panic tests rather than full-on flee. And the hammerers have turned round. Yes, Orchard, that is hard to remember. Remembering when you fall back in good order from being shot and when you flee, and then also in combat when you fall back in good order, when you give ground and when you flee. They've made it more complicated, haven't they? So, blasting away, you can see that the organ gun is finished off here, which isn't that bad actually for the Hippogriff to not have killed it last turn, because that means that it's now free to do something on its own turn. And this is something I've mentioned before, if you're going to die, it's best to do it in your opponent's turn, because that way you then have the unit that you are fighting stood out in the open for you to shoot them or charge them. If you die on your own turn, they are then free to go and hit something else. So, the hammerers are in position, they've turned round, so they're going to come towards some of these threats. That's my corpse pile over there, so don't go thinking any of that's alive. And the men-at-arms are heavily whittled down. Lots of whittling going on. And I think he's taken another wound as well, this dude here, on the Royal Pegasus. So, turn 3 for the Brettonians. And there are charges declared, there are flees made. And so if we look here, we've got an engineer and we've got an organ gun. They both flee. The organ gun flees sufficiently far that it actually goes through my other units and ends up down here. I think I rolled like 12 on the dice for the organ gun. So it flees all the way over here. Where was it? It was right next to the anvil. So it goes ploop, and then it couldn't land in the spot it was supposed to because it was then on top of the quarrelers, I think. So it ended up all the way down there. And the engineer, I can't even see the engineer right now. So, oh, there he is. He just plops to the other side of the anvil. And then they failed, or they chose not to redirect their charge into the hammerers because they thought that would be a terrible idea. And I think both of these heroes are correct in that assumption because they don't have that many attacks. And the hammerers are stubborn and they can issue a challenge as well. And then after combat, even if they lose and have to fall back in good order, they can then go super wide when they do that, so they'd get loads of attacks back on you next turn. So probably a good idea to not fight the hammerers with a hero like this that isn't super killy. They're decent, but they're no like mega chaos lord on a dragon. These guys continue fleeing, and then at that point I remembered, wait a minute, I think they should have only fallen back in good order. So my opponent said, yeah, I think that's right, so let's just turn them round here because we've already been fleeing them, so we'll just stop it there and start playing it correctly. Because obviously they would have been somewhere else last turn, and we wouldn't have known exactly where they should be. Or what shots they would have been blocking to other units or anything. So, you can see that not much is accomplished on that Brettonian turn with my successful flees from the war machines. A couple of thunderers are killed by these peasant archers, the peasant bowmen. There they are. So yeah, we go to all the trouble of painting his eyeballs and he gets shot. How is that fair? We've got another vortex in play, which is going to block some firing lanes perhaps. And onto my turn. So I've got one turn to shoot down these scary things here and charge them. So the hammerers, they charge into the Hippogriff, and as you can see, they do not make it because I rolled 2 2s. I needed a 4 on one of the dice. My opponent chose not to flee because if he'd fled, then I could have just charged into this hero instead, redirected the charge. That wouldn't have been able to flee, and it would have been at the flank, and it would have just got crunched horribly. So decided to hold, and the hammerers could not roll a 4 on 2 dice. Because obviously they can't, because they're hammerers. So the reason you think, well, they're not going to fit through that gap. Since they didn't successfully make the charge, then they just went wide anyway. But if they were going to charge him, they would have made themselves narrow enough to fit through the gap with their drilled. By the way, I have got a poll going, which is best dwarf war machine in the old world. I haven't put the flame cannon on there because I don't own one, so I haven't seen it in action. But I see that the organ gun is winning by a landslide at the moment, 67%, which I agree with. I think the organ gun is very good, especially with one engineer to support two of them, because it's a decent number of shots, and more shots means more reliable. You're not just relying on the opponent to fail one armor save to get any wounds through. So that's why I like the organ guns. And they're also in the rare section, but I think that might be a negative because they're competing with Iron Drakes, who are also very good. But you should have good choices in the rare section, really, shouldn't you? So I agree with that poll result at the moment. Bolt thrower on 18%, cannon only 13%, grudge thrower 3%. Yeah, I don't like the grudge thrower at all. I don't like stone throwers in the old world. I don't think they're accurate enough, unfortunately. I think the cannon is a bit weak compared to the Empire Great Cannon. The bolt thrower has a role because it's so cheap, but just one of them doesn't get a lot done. If you take several, then you're not paying that much for them. So they will hit something, and they definitely have a role, I think, bolt throwers. I would definitely get a second one instead of the cannons, I think. In general, in a perfect list where I own everything a billion times. So, lots of shooting going on. And let's see, who is dead? So, the Iron Drakes, I think, shoot down... Do they kill Lady Elise? I think they do. And then these men-at-arms are significantly whittled down, which is a phrase I'm going to be using a lot with my shooting, down to 3 models. And in the next turn, the Royal Pegasus gets into the Anvil of Doom, who decides to hold and not flee. And the Hippogriff just jumps over the Hammerers, so they can't be charged by them. Or, yeah. And then the Pegasus Knights are hanging out around the back here. Peasant Bowmen shoot down a couple of Iron Drakes. Trebuchet takes out the Bolt Thrower. So the Trebuchet actually hits something, but it wasn't aiming for the Bolt Thrower. It was aiming for the Quarrelers, I think, and it scattered directly onto the Bolt Thrower, which is quite funny. So the Bolt Thrower is dead. The Anvil is taking wounds from the Royal Pegasus, and I'm running out of guns. I do have an organ gun there, which can shoot at this guy. You can see him, and I've got a cannon there as well. So, on my turn... wait a minute. So the Hammerers... Okay, yep, so this is the... I was thinking that was the Royal Pegasus there for a second. I was getting confused. This is the Pegasus Knights. So in my turn, the Hammerers charge that unit and kill 2 of them. Don't take many casualties. The Anvil and the Royal Pegasus are still going at it. Orchard says, something that is unbreakable used to also be immune to psychology. I guess that's not a thing now. Well, let me have a look. So the Anvil, I'm going to open its entry in this app here and see what it says about unbreakable. So it is immune to psychology, but that's a separate rule. So it has that as well. But it also has unbreakable, which means that it doesn't have to make break tests, basically. So all it can do is just give ground when losing combat. Yeah, the Anvil cannot flee from combat. But if you're immune to psychology, let's see. Oh, yeah, there it is. So yeah, I didn't spot that the Anvil was actually immune to psychology as well. So technically the Anvil should not be able to choose flee as a charge reaction. There you go. So the regular war machines can, but the Anvil cannot, so I'll have to keep that in mind for future reference. Yeah, immune to psychology means that you cannot choose flee as a charge reaction. Yeah, so that makes the immune to psychology bubble for the anvil way less appealing, I think, because often you'll want to flee with war machines to get away from charges. So, yeah. Interesting. That's good to know. Yeah, so it's not listed under the unbreakable. It's just a separate rule. So it's not covered in the same thing there. Yeah, so you don't want to make your whole army immune to psychology because you might want to flee strategically. So that makes it very interesting, actually. Interesting choice of when to do that. Is there anything in the game that has unbreakable but not immune to psychology? If anyone knows of a unit, then let me know. So there will be times that come up in this tournament where the anvil flees, so that is wrong. On to turn 5 for the Brettonians, or... Yes, so you can see that I chose not to go after the Pegasus Knight with the hammers when it fled, because I wanted to turn back and face these two threats instead. But you can see the Iron Drakes had put some wounds onto this guy, so he's only got one left. So, into the Brettonian turn. The guy with one wound, what does he do? Well, this Pegasus Knight runs off the table, which is good. And he decides, probably not a good idea to charge into Iron Drakes. But he does anyway, and he survives the stand and shoot. And there's also a single peasant that charges them as well, the one peasant that was remaining. So when this happened, I was thinking, if they both charge me, that's actually really good news, because I can stand and shoot and kill the hippogriff, because it's only got one wound left. And then in combat, I'll kill the last peasant and scoop up those delicious points. But we'll see whether that comes to pass. We've got the trebuchet, which lands and does a wound to the engineer, because it landed a partial hit on him. And then the Royal Pegasus kills the anvil, so despite it being toughness 6 in close combat, it still goes down, who then overruns into the engineer. The Iron Drake champion issues a challenge, and the peasant champion accepts it. And the Iron Drakes are dead. This guy's on his last wound though, so I'm pretty confident I'm going to kill both these characters if I get the opportunity. So, turn 6 for me, only one turn left, and it's just an engineer fighting him, so maybe not the best chance of killing him. I do turn all my guns and kill the Hippogriff Duke though, so he is dead, he was on his final wound, so... And then I shoot down the final peasant in the other unit, and then whittle away at this unit of peasants as well. The engineer dies, and this guy overruns into the quarrelers, so he's going to have a chance to kill them in turn 6. The hammerers can't do much there. And turn 6 for the Brettonians, so the trebuchet misfires. And I issue a challenge with the champion of the quarrelers, which means that the unit is not going to die. And because they are not half of the unit strength of their opponents, then it's going to be very difficult to get rid of them. And yeah, they don't die, so that's that. So the score for the game, I got a good number of kills there. So let's pull up the result page here. This is on the Best Coast Pairings website, by the way, which is where a lot of tournaments input their scores and get their matchups made, rather than having any kind of spreadsheet of your own. So, I got 1,631 points, including banners and such in combat, and my opponent got the hilarious score of 1,111, which means that it is a 13-7 win to the dwarves. So, this is kind of what you expect, because even when it's going really well with the shooting, and you gun down the best targets, which are knights, things still make it into your lines and have easy kills when they get there. So you're never going to get a massive 20-0 with the dwarves, because something is going to reach your lines and it's going to kill a few things if you're running a gun line. So unless you get ridiculously lucky and kill everything that's got any speed in turn 1, you're going to lose some stuff. So big wins seem unlikely. Big losses are also... You can get big losses, but you've got a decent chance to defend against them, because you've got so many guns that you're bound to kill some things, generally. So massive losses may be avoidable. So on to the next round. So a draw and a win. That's a good start for the dwarves. Into the third round, we are on another open battle. And I'm just going to pull up my opponent's list here. Which is... Bum bum bum. Warriors of Chaos. So... yes, Orchard. Dwarves can have a good matchup against Brettonians because they don't have a super mega killy ultra murder loads of saves stacked up big flying hero. They do have flying heroes, but they're not as ridiculously powerful as some of the other factions. They also don't have any horrible tricks that are really strong against dwarves, like the Terrorgeist Screams, for example. So they rely on things like knights that are the perfect target for war machines to kill because they're low number of wounds. And they rely on armor, generally knights, and dwarf war machines have got decent AP on them. So, yes, malign musings. Dwarves do struggle to get big wins. I don't see how gunline can get a big win unless you're against nothing but infantry that are walking towards you very slowly. If you've got anything with any speed, something's going to get in and then it's going to start munching through your lines, so you will take losses. So, Warriors of Chaos. Scariest thing about Warriors of Chaos is, undoubtedly, the 596 point Chaos Lord on a dragon. So, this Lord on a dragon, the items that he's got, let's have a look. It's a long list of stuff. So, he's got Brazen Collar, Crown of Everlasting Conquest, Mark of Nurgle, and lots of armor. So I think he's on a 3+ save. He then has a 5+ ward save and a 5+ regeneration save, I think. Now I'm not sure which thing does what in this list here, but I think he has all of those things. He's got 3 saves, basically. And he's got 10 wounds. Wow, wow, wow. So, that is going to be very tricky to get rid of, to the point where, is it even worth targeting? Maybe not. Might be worth just trying to kill everything else, because 10 wounds, even if I got very lucky in a couple of turns and did loads of wounds to it, that's all my shooting being used on it, and then it'll just fly away and hide. And the other entire army will be right in my face, ready to charge, because I've shot everything at him. So, you'll notice as well that the enemy has more drops than I do. I'll tell you what else is in the list as well. So there's a Sorcerer Lord, who is... which one's the Sorcerer Lord? He is... I'm trying to see if he's on a mount. So he's on a Chaos Steed of Tzeentch. So I think he's behind there, behind the building. He's just kind of got a swirly thing on his base. So we'll get there. Then in the core, there is a unit of 5 Chaos Knights, who I identify immediately as something I can kill. And I think the Chaos Knights are over there. I think the Knights over there are chosen. So I think these ones are the regular Chaos Knights. Then there are some Marauders right there. And they have flails. And they're a skirmishing unit. 2 units of Chaos Warhounds. 5 in each one. There are 7 Forsaken, which are there. So they're probably going to get killed because they're prime organ gun zone immediately. There are Chosen Chaos Knights, which I think are this unit over here. And there are 3 individual Dragon Ogre champions. So there's one there, and another one somewhere. Maybe behind the building, around here somewhere. So, because I am significantly less drops, I had to put down all my stuff first, so my opponent could then put the stuff that doesn't want to get shot by an organ gun out on the flanks, which is why I was forced to put them in the middle, so that they can shoot all over the place, theoretically. I've got my hammerers in the middle again, so this is the standard setup, because I'm putting most of my stuff down first. I can't react to the enemy, so it's a definite weakness of the War Machine list, because you have to put down 5 of them as 1 drop, which on the one hand means you're more likely to get the first turn. On the other hand, you don't see where any of the stuff you want to shoot actually is, so you have to spread them out. Perfidy doesn't approve of Nurgle and Tzeentch being in the same army. Well, Tzeentch likes change. Nurgle must like change as well, because he's always adding extra pustules to people. Yeah, because rotting and festering is a state of change, isn't it? So on that basis, I could understand them having some common goals. And you can see my gyrocopter has made a vanguard move up there, opposing those hounds. So on this side, I've got cannon and thunderers. And what are they up against? Well, they're up against knights, hounds, marauders, and a dragon ogre. Next along, I've got iron drakes here, which are facing off a dragon ogre and some marauders. The bolt thrower as well. The bolt thrower has a decent view across to the big stuff behind that building, though. Hammerers in the middle. I'm not convinced they'll get to fight anything, but I'm going to start pushing them towards the enemy anyway, wherever I figure out they're going to be needed. 2 organ guns in the middle with the anvil, because I didn't know where anything was going to be when I put them down. And on this side, we've got the rangers as a speed bump. So any of that stuff that wants to hit the rangers, those are the kind of things that they would have a good time against, I think. Knights and hounds. The stand and shoot would be quite devastating against both of those, potentially, and then hitting them with great weapons is good as well. On the hill behind them, we've got the quarrelers to shoot over, and the cannon. Engineer down there, so he's going to benefit a couple of my war machines. Not all of them. Because I've had to spread out my machines, the engineer can't benefit all of them. So you just have to put in wherever you think he's most needed. And on the enemy left flank, there is the giant, vile Chaos Lord on dragon. And it is actually the Stormcast Eternal's dragon, heavily converted to be an evil 2-headed Chaos Dragon. It's very cool, and the most impressive thing about it is the fact that it just about fits on this tiny base as well, which is amazing. This was a very nice army. This is one of those that I was very impressed by. Some nice conversions in there. And I think I get more pictures of this guy on the lunch break of day 2 as well, so you'll see even more. Nurgle, destructive creation. Tzeentch, creative destruction. Yes, so that's a reasonable way of putting it. So their goals may align from time to time, let's say. And turn 1 goes to me, so we're going to be able to do some blasting immediately. And you can see we've killed 1 chosen knight already, 1 hound, and so this unit here, these are the Forsaken. They have been heavily whittled down with shooting, and yeah, the organ guns did some serious damage there. Over on this side, the cannon, and I think the cannon kills one of these regular Chaos Knights. And the gyrocopter steamed off the Warhounds, who also got shot by the Thunderers as well. So the Warhounds on that side are just toast. 4 hounds left over there. 4 Knights, and the big stuff over on that side is still safe. The middle is looking pretty clear now, because those 2 aren't a threat at all, so they're probably just going to go behind the building and hide and preserve their points, because all they do if they move forward is get shot and die by things that may not have another target next turn anyway, so they would have to shoot them. People like the engineer could take a pot shot at them as well over the course of the game and finish them off and not diminish my shooting capacity for the whole army, so going forward is a really terrible idea for them. Turn 1 for Chaos. So, what does the Sorcerer do? What's this? The Rangers are gone. How did this happen, you may ask? So, the Sorcerer Lord got a spell that makes them take a panic test. And they failed. So they fell back in good order, away from the Sorcerer, which sent them straight off the table, because they were touching the edge. Wow, wow, wow. So, pay attention to what spells the enemy has, and then roll better on your leadership tests, would be my advice. Because they are gone. The Rangers are just dead. So if you look at where they were right out to the edge. Because my thinking was, anything that charges them, with a stand and shoot and then hitting back with great weapons, I'll also be pulling some of them off from the other end when they're murdered. So the centre would be still round about here somewhere, and centre of the enemy unit strength fleeing, they'd probably go that way because the knights are going to have more unit strength than the dogs. So I was thinking they would be alright there, but falling back in good order, they just fall back and die. So let's see. Orchard, wouldn't you have to pivot and die, pivot and flee? Well, Let's have a look. So, if they pivot, would they pivot so they're directly facing away from the enemy before they make their fall back in good order? Is that what you're saying? If that's the case, then they would be in a line. Let's see, where's the centre? So it's still, it's this sort of angle here, centre to centre. So they would still line up like that. So they'd still be pretty close to the edge. So the fall back in good order, I think, would still have taken them off. But if that's the way it works, that is interesting, though, for future reference. If you, when you're falling back in good order, as a result of shooting, you pivot away from the enemy before you do the move. So that makes it slightly different. Yeah, so that does make sense, what you're saying. So I think they still would have gone anyway in this circumstance, but in general, that's good to know. So they are gone. You'll also see that I used the Anvil's rune to give them better armour this turn as well, knowing they were going to get attacked, but now they're just gone. Because they couldn't roll a leadership test, and the enemy were too far away for me to dispel it. The gyrocopter flees from the knights and the dragon ogre, and successfully outranges them. So I'm going to have another turn to shoot them. All the enemies move up into the space vacated by the rangers, including the big unkillable lord. So everything is parked in front of me now. So whatever I don't kill is going to charge me next turn. So this is bad. The rangers were supposed to be dealing with that. Yeah, I didn't anticipate them having to take a panic test, you see, because I gave them the rune of courage that makes them immune to fear and terror. So I was thinking there's no chance of them fleeing before combat even starts. I was wrong, because there's a spell that just makes them take a panic test, and if you happen to roll 10 on the dice, you can't roll 9 or under, then they're just gone. So they were toasted. And by toasted, I mean they left the battlefield in shame and then turned up to the Dwarf Hold and said, yeah, well, a wizard, he scared us a bit. I don't know what he did. Maybe flashed his pants at them or something, and they decided, you know what, we've seen enough. We don't want any of this chaos nonsense. We're off. They've gone home, left everyone else to die. Yeah, so this is a scary looking flank. What are we going to do about this? Let's find out. So some of the quarrelers are fireballed off, I think, as well. This flank is looking way less scary, and there's a good distance between the enemy and my shooting unit, so I'm going to have a bit of time to deal with them. This flank, horrifying. So, my turn 2. Let's see, what does all my shooting accomplish? Well, I put 4 wounds onto the Chaos Lord, so he's got 6 left, so that is actually a pretty damn good start. I also put some wounds onto this Dragon Ogre, because not everything was able to target him. And also, once I got him down that far, from the stuff that was definitely going to shoot him, I then realised, actually, I could kill something with my other shooting rather than going through hoops to try and do another 1 wound to him. Because I'm not going to kill him at this point, because the stuff that could actually kill him hadn't successfully done so, or got him near to death. So that's with the organ guns and the anvil all firing over there. And the hammerers turn around to face that way as well, because I have a feeling they're going to want to go in that direction. Let's see. Tartarsaurus, what happened with your rangers is literally how slayers are made. Yes, so I'm going to assume that those rangers go back and they immediately have their hair forcibly dyed orange, turned into slayers, sent back onto the battlefield with axes and tattoos and told, you are never running away from another battle ever again. And over on this side, you can see I've killed another knight and done some wounds to the Dragon Ogre. So he's actually a bit vulnerable now, so he might hesitate to go in. The knights may still go forward because they're still very powerful, but they are whittled down. The gyrocopter didn't rally and continues fleeing away from the enemy, by the way. So we'll see what happens next with the dragon. So things like I think the cannon, this guy may have been too close for the cannon to shoot at, so I think the cannon, rather than firing a grape shot in there, which is only AP 1, I think the cannon may have targeted this guy. Everything that could, that was a significant threat, such as the torpedo, the organ guns, and the anvil, which is AP 2, all of that stuff targeted the dragon, but only managed to put 4 wounds on it. Stu says, you have a perfect excuse to buy a unit of Slayers. They are rangers that ran away in disgrace. Yes, that's a good idea, actually. So as soon as the Slayers are available for purchase, I'll be getting a big unit of them. I don't know if it'll be competitive at all, but they're the one old-school dwarf unit that I don't own any variation of. I don't have the old hammers, but I've got the new ones. I don't have any long beards, but I could have them because they do have a newer model. The old Slayers, I kind of always wanted them, but they were never that amazing, even back in 8th edition, so I was never compelled to buy loads of those, and then the new exciting stuff came out, like the Hammerers and the Iron Drakes, and the Gyro Bomber, and Belagar Iron Hammer, and all that cool stuff was released, so that was tying up my funds back then. So, let's see what happens over here. You can see that a charge is going to be declared from these knights into the cannon. And as predicted, this Dragon Ogre is hiding behind the terrain because it's almost dead, and the Marauders are coming this way instead. Lots of charges being declared here. So, the cannon gets successfully charged by the knights, which is very sad. The dragon goes into the Quarrelers, which is okay because he's not going to overrun into anything from them. This Dragon Ogre takes a stand and shoot, I think, and I don't believe he makes a charge successfully. The Chosen get into this cannon, and the Dragon Ogre is just hanging out in here, and you can see it's a human hand pushing the Dragon Ogre into position. So, now this is interesting as well, because this gyrocopter was a fleeing unit. Had those knights made contact with the gyrocopter on the way in, would it have just died? Would they have stopped at the point at which they killed it, or would they have continued and successfully made their charge? If someone knows the answer to that one off the top of their head, let me know, because that's interesting, but thankfully they didn't touch it anyway. They do kill the cannon, and they have to overrun. I think they might be frenzied, or they may have just failed to restrain, so they overrun off the table, so they'll come back on next turn, which gives me time to turn around and look at them for when they do come back, so I'm not too sad about that. Over here, the cannon is horribly butchered by the Chosen, who overrun into the Quarrelers, and they're going to get horribly killed as well. The Sorcerer casts some spells and kills the Engineer, which is very mean. Let's see. Orchard says, you can't clip like that anymore. If the copter would be a target of a charge, it would flee. So, if you make accidental contact with a fleeing unit while charging something else, does that mean that it flees? Interesting. Or does it just die? The Dragon and Demon Slayer are useless against Behemoths because they will trample him. Yes, that is kind of true. So, yeah, the Slayers that are supposed to kill big monsters do have issues. And one of those issues is they just get shot, which is sad. And if you take a unit of them, the unit gets shot. And they die very easily. I've always said that Slayers, because they are supposed to have a glorious death, they will go through a lot to avoid dying before they get to that glorious death. I'm sure a Slayer is going to be very careful getting out of bed, because if they accidentally slip and split their skull open on the floor, that is not a glorious death. So I think Slayers should have a ward save against shooting, personally. Maybe even a 4+ ward save against shooting or magic. How about that? Any attacks in the shooting phase, 4+ ward save. So if you're going to kill them, the best way to do it is in combat. I would also accept a 5+ ward save, but 4+ would be ideal. Because they are Slayers. I'm thinking of the Gotrek and Felix books. If Gotrek had just got shot and killed, that's not a very exciting adventure, is it? And the Slayers are supposed to be these very cool, characterful, thematic units, maybe the most characterful in the entire dwarf army. And they just get shot down by piddly arrows very easily, which is sad. Okay, let's see. Totsor says they have high magic resistance. Yes, but that doesn't help them against being shot with an arrow in the butt. So you can see here that lots of units have been murdered, so this entire area is clear, and the enemy are now facing this way. But I do have another turn to blast away at them, so we'll see what I can accomplish here. So turn 3, for me. 2 organ guns, an anvil, and iron drakes. What do we accomplish? We get the Chosen down to a single knight. And that's about it. I don't do anything to the big guy. And the Iron Drakes next to the Bolt Thrower in the centre of the table are just repositioning a bit. I think they might have killed a Marauder. The Gyrocopter also got into position to do something about that as well. I think he tried to drop a bomb onto the Dragon Ogre, but failed to do anything. Let's see. Obscure Minator. If the charging unit can wheel to avoid the fleeing unit, it should. If not, it can halt or continue ahead. If it continues ahead, it stops. Destroys the fleeing unit and stops, no reform. Okay, yeah, so you can choose... If you must contact the fleeing unit, then you would stop and destroy the fleeing unit. So that would lead to the charge not hitting its target, presumably then. Or you can choose to stop. Interesting. So yeah, if the unit had been forced to hit the gyrocopter, then they could have just killed it by touching it, which is... It sounds about right from my understanding of the rules. So you can see that I've turned these guys around as well, because when these knights come back onto the table, I want to be able to blast them to death. Okay, onto the Chaos turn, and an underwhelming shooting phase means we're going to be charged by a lot of stuff. The Iron Drakes flee, and more charges are put in. The Anvil illegally flees, because we found out the Anvil shouldn't be able to flee now, because it is actually immune to psychology, which I have found out means you cannot flee. So the Anvil shouldn't be able to flee at all, which makes perfect sense, but it also makes sense that it shouldn't be able to pursue or give ground or fall back in good order, which are all things that it can do. So it's just weird that the Anvil can move at all. And there are situations where if you're very clever, or there's a very weird game situation that comes up, you can manipulate the position of your units and the enemy units in such a way that an Anvil can be charged, assuming it'll lose combat, and then give ground, thus pushing it 2 inches in a specific direction, which means that it's closer to an enemy for some reason. Yeah, so there's really bizarre ways you could go about moving the Anvil, but technically it can move, but flee isn't something it should be able to do as a charge reaction, which I've illegally done here, but I now know. And I think the organ gun flees as well. So the organ gun bounces over the top of this organ gun to there. And because of that, some of the charges aren't going to succeed. The Marauders go into the Iron Drakes. The Knights come back onto the table, and that dice was marking out where the short range of the Thunderers is, so they make sure they go into long range, so they're less likely to be shot down and killed. The Dragon Ogre is getting in the way of the Hammerers slightly, although only somewhat, because of course they can redress the ranks before charging, so if they wanted to charge something that was here, for instance, they could just lose a rank there and charge past him. There's a magical vortex in town, blocking line of sight from one of these organ guns, the one that isn't fleeing. And Hammerers take some fireballs to the face, and a lot of them die. Yeah, Hammerers, I'm kind of underwhelmed by Hammerers now. The only reason they were so scary before was because I was paying like 200 points for runes for them on the banner and on the BSB. So that made them scary. But it also put them up to like 500 points. So, yeah, I'm not sold on Hammerers at the moment. I think maybe using them in a different role could be good. Maybe running smaller units of them, and maybe using them to guard war machines, like put them behind war machines, for example, like a unit of 5 or 10. So if there is an enemy chaff unit that you're kind of trading to get rid of, you're going to have the Hammerers left over, because they would certainly kill a unit like that. But then again, the kind of unit that's going to hit a war machine, if you're going to put yourself behind it, it's only going to be one war machine. And if the war machine survives, you're stuck there because you're going to struggle to pivot past them to get into combat if the enemy is not very wide. So if you put them off to one side slightly and put them far enough back, then you're going to be further from the enemy. So if they kill the war machine, then they could flee from you and you're probably going to fail the charge. So I'm struggling to see a good role for the hammerers in a gun line. Maybe they have a good role in a more combat-themed list, but what I found when I was running a more combat-heavy army earlier on in the old world was that the enemy would just stay at arm's reach, stay out of their charge range, and just drop magic spells on them and vortexes around them. And they didn't have a good time there either. So it's a struggle for the hammerers. An Iron Drake dies, and the Iron Drakes give ground there and are followed up. So it's not looking great for the dwarves, but at least we didn't get charged too much because everyone fled. Illegally in the case of the Anvil of Doom. Orchard puts melee units on each side of the organ gun or other machines. The opponent will have to charge something. Yeah, so my concern is if they charge a machine between the melee units, they'll just overrun through the machine, and then your units can't then charge them in retaliation. So yeah, I don't think there is a perfect position for the hammerers in a list like this, unless you corner camp, in which case you can find a good position for them, I think. But I've already established I'm not going to be trying corner camping in the old world, because I want to actually play a game of Warhammer, and if my opponent decides that that's not a viable attack to go after the corner, then they'll just hide in their own corner, and then I don't have anything that can shoot them, so we'll just have a draw. Then there will be games where there just is no Warhammer played, which would be a very boring report. So I'm not going to corner camp. Turn 4 for the dwarves. So what was going on here? I get rid of the vortex, or the vortex moves, should I say. So it bounces through loads of my units, but barely does anything actually. It doesn't really wound anybody particularly. It might actually kill a marauder. And I then shoot away at the knights that came back onto the table. There's one remaining, which seems to be a theme when I'm shooting things. And the bolt thrower doesn't do much. The organ guns don't do too much. The hammerers charge the dragon ogre. And you can see, let me go back a sec. So they then push it back. So I think it falls back in good order, and they go after it. They won the combat. The Iron Drakes are getting nudged back again by the Marauders, I think, or it might be a draw that time. And the shooting doesn't do much this turn, although I do kill off... Do I kill off the Final Chosen this turn? I think so. I don't see it in any of the pictures, so I think the Final Chosen is actually dead now. I think. So, in the enemy turn, the dragon gets into the organ gun. The Marauders are joined by this knight down here, so is he going to charge the Iron Drakes? No, he charges round into the bolt thrower. And this organ gun fled, which is why it's bounced down here. And combat over here, the hammerers versus the enemy sorcerer who charged in as well with the dragon ogre. So the hammerers actually win that combat because they do some good wounds. And the bolt thrower gets overrun into, so the bolt thrower is dead as well. But you can't overrun twice in the same turn, so the Chaos Lord is standing there. Tarsus says, I took a unit of 30 dwarf warriors in marching column and just shoved them diagonally up the middle of the board. Gave myself line of sight issues with a gun line, but it worked out well in the end. That'd be interesting. Yeah, running dwarf combat units in marching column, especially the ones that you can have drilled put onto, marching them up across the table quite fast for dwarf standards, and then you can use the anvil to give them extra moves as well. And what I found though is that when I have a plan that relies on the anvil to give them an extra move, I don't succeed with the roll, because I think that spell is the one that's the highest. I think you need a 10. So you need 7, and then it needs to not get dispelled. So if you have... I usually have a plan where I go into a particular frontage, move into a position, and then I want to change the frontage again for the anvil move, but then I fail the roll, so they don't get to do it. So that's been my experience so far with trying to move the dwarf army around rapidly. So this is not looking good at all, and you can see the Chaos Knight has gone up there after killing the bolt thrower. It overran in that direction. And down here, the hammerers are still in combat there, but we're down to just, I think, it may well be the BSB and the standard bearer in the unit now. So that's not looking good. The Marauders and the Iron Drakes are still going at it. Gyrocopter tries to flame this knight, unsuccessfully. And the Dragon Ogre tries to charge the Gyrocopter in the next Chaos turn, but the Gyrocopter successfully flees away and does not get caught. The Dragon is now into the Anvil, so this isn't going to end well. And kills the Anvil, overruns towards the Thunderers. So it's got 6 wounds on it still, since turn 1, by the way. I haven't done any further wounds to it since then, despite shooting a few things at it. And the Iron Drake's getting whittled down by the Marauders. The Hammerers, the BSB's dead, so they're down to just the standard bearer. And then he dies as well. So it's not looking good, and there are lots of enemy units that are heavily wounded that are not finished off. So turn 6 for the Dwarves. Can the Organ Gun do anything? Yes, it can kill the final Chaos Knight. So we get points for the Knights. The Thunderers do a single wound to the Lord, which gives them a slight chance of killing him, but very unlikely. Turn 6 for Chaos, so the Iron Drake's finished off there. The Lord goes into the Thunderers. And so, with the position they're in, if I were to issue a challenge and then lose combat and fall back in good order, I would be off the table, unless I roll a 1, because of the positioning of the unit, because of where the table edge is. So, if I let it kill more of them, I then take models from both ends, so I'm actually further away from the table edge, so I've got more leeway to fall back. So that's my plan, rather than issuing a challenge. So that's my logic. So what I'm thinking is, though, that when they fall back in good order, should they actually, instead of falling straight backwards, should they pivot so that their centre is, if they're fleeing centre to centre and he's there, would they flee directly that way? But if he's facing this way, do they just keep going in a direct line there? Or does he have to be in the centre of the unit for that to happen? And if he's off to one side slightly, they go that way? Very strange. But 5 of them get killed, and then they flee, and they're pursued and die. The Gyrocopter does not die. The Organ Gun does not die. So there we go. So the result for that game, obviously that's a loss. Let's have a look at the final scores. So I killed 753 points, which isn't too horrendous. And my opponent killed, including banners and stuff, 2,070 points. So obviously it's a loss, but again, with all my shooting, it's very hard to be 20-0'd, because you can't get much more of a one-sided game than that, really. When you factor in things like the Rangers running off the table without doing anything, and then this Chaos Lord with 1,000,000 wounds and 1,000,000 different saves just steaming down the table killing everything, I still managed to kill 753 points with my shooting. So it's very difficult to 20-0 a dwarf, I would say, when they've got guns. Let's see, Orchard says, I think you have to turtle up even more. Yeah, I don't like corner camping. And ignoring the Lord is something I did start doing, but I had 1 round of shooting at him. Because you're really only going to get 1 chance, because after you have 1 round of shooting at him, he's going to be in combat. And then you've got no chance. So I fired everything I had into him in 1 round to see how high I could get him, and I got 4 wounds off him. And at that stage I then decided, okay, it's pointless trying to finish him off now. So you just have to cut your losses, know when to quit, and then start targeting other things. Perfidy says might need a different army. How dare you? Well, it's funny you should say that, because I am obviously painting Brettonians at the moment, and I do have a Vampire Counts army that's probably not that competitive, because it was mostly built for 8th edition and for Kings of War as well. So I don't have a Terrorgeist, for example, but I do have some Knights and some Wolves and loads of Skeletons and Zombies, so I can play Vampire Counts, which is actually what I'm planning to do next time I play a game of Old World, just to give them a try, for a bit of variety. And if I take Dwarves to the next tournament, I will probably try a drastically different list, just to try something different as well. regardless of how the rest of the games, or how all the games at this event go, because it's still going quite well up to this point. A loss, a win, and a draw. And I'm not going to corner camp with vampires. Certainly not. Stephen says, I've only had one-sided loss with the dwarves, and that's when I went full melee, Slayer heavy. It was real bad. Yes, I can imagine the close combat dwarf list getting 20-0, definitely. Because the enemy they're going to be faster, they can pick and choose which units to engage with. They can mess you up with magic from a distance and vortexes, and you can't do anything about them at range without the guns. So I can understand how that can be a massacre. On to the next one, which is command and control. So there is an objective in the middle, and if you hold that, you get, I think it's 150 or 200 points at the end of the game. And to do that, you need to have a unit strength 5 unit on it, and the enemy not 2. And I'm up against... Let's pull up the enemy list in round 4, which is the Dark Elves. So you can see immediately that I've got a massive long line of rangers over there. And I've got a cannon in the woods. I've got my thunderers with iron drakes in front of them. What is this madness, you might think? Well, I'll explain it when I go through the opposing army. Both my organ guns over here. This big blocking bit of terrain that is the objective for the game is a problem because it's blocking lines of sight. So I've got the anvil in a position where it can see both sides. I've got quarrelers on the hill with a bolt thrower. I've got another cannon out on this flank as well, out on the right. Engineer down there. Hammerers here. So, what is in the opposing list? Let's crack this open. We have got... let's see, who is who? There is a Dark Elf Master on a Cold One chariot, which I think is... Hold on. Where is it? Going back. There it is. There's the Cold One chariot. So Cold Ones have stupidity, but they're pretty good other than that. Then there are 5 harpies hiding behind the trees. There are some witch elves. 23 of them with a hag. There is also a death hag in the unit as well with the executioner's axe, which I think always wounds on a 2, which is very powerful. There is a supreme sorceress on a dark Pegasus, which is there, and that has 2 focus familiar, which is... It's another thing in the game that seems really cruel to dwarves, because the dwarves dispelling... If they have foot heroes dispelling, then they only have an 18-inch range, so you can stay out and do your spells easily. If they have the anvil, it can't move, so you can stay out and do your spells easily. Just to make it even easier, because you don't have enough ways to get your magic off without the dwarves being able to stop you, then you can put down the focus familiar, and then cast your spells from that point instead. And then they still have to be in range of the wizard to dispel the spells. So you can stay even more safely away from the enemy while doing the spells. So I think the dwarves are going to have a tough time stopping the magic in this game, and that's level 4. Then we've got some Cold One Knights, a unit of 5 of those. And there are 2 big monsters as well, and also, who's this? This is the... This is a Manticore, which is the High Beastmaster on a Manticore. So that's quite cool as well. There is a Charybdis and more harpies. Or that's the same harpies, actually. Yeah, it's the same ones. So Charybdis and the Hydra. So the Hydra seems to get weaker as it takes damage. They have beast handlers with them as well. And then there are 2 units of Dark Riders. One there's the Cold Ones, and the other Dark Riders have vanguarded out in front of my forces to block some lines of sight. So the reason I've got shooting units one behind the other is because they are up against some large targets, and I want the Thunderers to shoot the Hydra, which is there, so they don't need to actually see it. And my opponent gets the first turn. So, what's going to happen here? They're obviously going to get up in my face because I've got shooting superiority. These are the spells that the level 4 has. So Demonic Vigour, which is +1 to movement, toughness and initiative. The Summoning, which is an enemy unit takes strength 4 hits with AP. There is Gathering Darkness, which reduces the initiative of an enemy unit. And there is Steed of Shadows, which I think is a ridiculously powerful spell. So it lets a unit fly 12, so they can fly 24 inches, which I think is obscenely good. So Dark Riders getting into the flank of the Rangers, which I'm not really that bothered about, they're not very scary. Cold Ones and the monsters push up as fast as they can. And the Witch Elves fly 24 inches with a conveyance spell and land right in front of the Hammerers. Now, on the one hand, I'm thinking, oh, the Hammerers will get to fight. On the other hand, I can't go too wide because I'm still in my initial battle line here. So I'm not going to be able to go wider to hit them because there's things in the way. So if I'm charging them, I'm only going to be hitting them with 5 people, and they'll be going first, probably the Witch Elves. So they'll cut down the front rank and I won't be able to strike. Do I shoot them, or do I just take my chances with the Hammerers? Yeah, so I certainly wasn't expecting them to be flying 24 inches in front of me. That seems so powerful, that ability, being able to cast a conveyance, obviously which is too far away to be dispelled this early in the game, and then just flying 24 inches right in front of the enemy. That is horrifying. So, the chariot has moved up as well. Everyone's getting in his position to charge, so I'm going to have one good turn of shooting to blast everything. So, one Quarreler is killed as well as a result of a bit of shooting. Perfidy is looking forward to seeing Young Grimm's rules. His mini is great. Yes, it is a very good mini. The Gyrocopter takes a wound from some shooting as well. And Hammerers. So if you thought this situation was dire already, they've gone and lost half the unit to a magic spell. Okay, on to turn 1 for me. So this cannon misfires immediately and faces the wrong way now to show that it can't fire next turn either. The shooting from the Iron Drakes and the Thunderers takes out a Knight and puts some wounds onto the Hydra, so it's only got 2 left. So that's nice. And I also scorched with the Gyrocopter but didn't do too much. One of the handlers has been killed as well from the Hydra. The 2 organ guns start blasting and get the Charybdis down to 1 wound, which is a recurring theme with these games. I seem to get the shooting into such a position that I feel like I should kill something, but then it has 1 wound left on it at the end, so it still gets to perform its job. Cannon, bolt thrower start blasting away as well. The cannon on this side puts 4 wounds, or gets a couple of wounds off this chariot, so I think it's got 4 left. The Hammerers charge in, but they... Hold on, let me see what's going on here. So, okay, I think that picture might have been taken prematurely, you know. Yeah, that was a result of the combat, that was. They weren't magic missiled off at all. Yeah, I just took that picture too early, so it was out of sequence. Yeah, the magic missile is not in range yet, so ignore that. So they went into combat and they lost that many and then died. Yeah, because I took that picture and then remembered I hadn't taken the pictures the rest of the turn yet, so it was stuck in the wrong sequence. So no magic missile death for them yet. That was a different game. Pretty much every other game, they get fireballed off. They lose about half the unit to fireballs, usually. So, onto the Dark Elf turn now, because you can see they've just fallen back there, and the Witch Elves have gone into the organ gun. And this hag was doing all the damage there, just killed loads of them. So, charges from the Hydra into the Iron Drakes, they will get to stand and shoot. The Knights fail their stupidity test, so they can't charge, which is hilarious. The Dark Riders charge into the Rangers, who spent the turn deciding whether they should turn around to face the Dark Riders or charge the Hydra, and instead they decided to just shoot the Hydra and help out with that. Because they're not worried about a flank charge from a skirmish unit, because only 2 of them are going to be able to fight me anyway. And this charge, and this charge, and this charge. Let's see which ones make it. So stand and shoot puts a wound on, and then it fails the charge, which is good. The Charybdis fails the charge. The Manticore makes the charge into the Quarrelers. The engineer fled as well, beforehand, because he didn't want to get hit and then overrun into the anvil. The Dark Riders into the bolt thrower, the chariot into the cannon. So this flank's not looking too healthy, but the other side's looking better. So these guys just go straight forward because they failed their stupidity check. And the sorceress... Is she actually called a sorceress? Yeah, Supreme Sorceress. She's just hiding at the back. And does some wound... A single wound to the gyrocopter. You may notice that the Rangers have disappeared. So, they took one casualty in combat, which meant that the Dark Riders won combat by 1, by virtue of having a flank charge. And then the Rangers failed their leadership test on a 9 again. And they ran away and got cut down. Which is interesting. So, Rangers. Is it worth putting another upgrade on them to stop them running away so easily? Is there anything you can put on them that stops them failing their leadership test and dying horribly? I don't know. Dwarves are supposed to be brave, but it is these Rangers again. Take 1 casualty, lose combat by 1, fail the leadership test, flee, and die. So the Rangers are really underperforming at this event. So he's dead as well. So there they are, all dead. Because they rolled a 10 for their leadership test. Witch Elves overrun from the organ gun back into the Hammerers, so the Hammerers will get more attacks next turn, assuming they get to make any attacks. Manticore kills some Quarrelers. Bolt Thrower doesn't get killed by the Dark Riders, which is nice. Chariot kills the cannon. And there we go, so most of these combats are going on still. What about deploying unit Rangers in 4x4 formation? Well, I like to use them as a big shooting threat because they've got really good ballistic skill. So I really like their shooting ability, and then when you charge them in the front, they get a billion attacks back at you. But I can understand what you're saying, obviously, with potential rank bonus in a 4x4. So there is a place for Rangers that take up more of a combat block position. And there we go. So this flank's going well, apart from that ridiculous thing there. So, turn 2 for me. I blast down the Cold War Knights and the Hydra, so clear out this area. All my units around here get killed though, the Hammerers and the Quarrelers. The Bolt Thrower's still hanging on though, which is funny. He's got 1 crew left. And killed off the Charybdis as well. So cleared out loads of the stuff, so that's nice. And on to turn 3, see what the Dark Elves want to do about that. Well, they charge at this organ gun, and it flees, and it makes it all the way over there. So I think they both tried to charge the organ gun, and it fled and rolled a ridiculously high number, and went all the way up there. Dark Riders going after the cannon, but they fail their charge. These ones still fighting the Bolt Thrower. Don't manage to kill it this turn. So I've got another turn to shoot down the Manticore now, which is good. And yeah, so not much accomplished that turn. So I think these guys are close enough to be grape shot by the cannon now as well. But I think it can actually turn around and fire next turn as well. It was turn 1 that it misfired. So, turn 3 for me. The cannon turns round. Grape shot. Kills 3 Dark Riders. But they're hanging in there. I angle all my other units in such a way that they can get the best possible shooting into the Manticore with torpedoes and such, but I do not roll very well and don't do that many wounds. Let's see. Stu loves Dark Elves. They were the one that got away army in Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Hope GW re-releases. Perfidy. Most of their plastics are still available. Cities of Sigmar and Daughters of Cain and AOS. Some of them are certainly still available. I don't know how many. Stephen says, some enterprising dwarf has fitted the organ gun with an engine for escaping the enemy. Definitely, because I think I rolled a double 6, possibly there. So I got away 11 inches, which is hilarious. Gyrocopter comes in and scorches some Witch Elves, which is nice. And the Bolt Thrower finally dies this turn. This chariot, by the way, keeps failing stupidity tests, which is why it's kind of stuck around this area. So it's going okay. It's a mixed bag. We've had some horrible incidents and some good results in the middle and on this side slightly. The Sorceress is just chilling out, doing her thing. Okay, so this is an interesting situation. The Witch Elves are charging the anvil. Because the Manticore is there, and there's a gyrocopter there, and all these things, when they charge, they can't fully close the door on it, so only one of them is going to be touching. So let's have a look. The Dark Riders charge the cannon again, and they do make it this time. The Chariot gets closer to the action. The Manticore kills off the organ gun that was previously fleeing and overruns over here, ready to be shot by Trollhammer torpedoes. And the cannon actually wins combat against the Dark Riders, which is hilarious. And they have to, I think it wins anyway, I think they have to go back away. I think that's right. Could have been a draw maybe? I'll let you know what happens in the next turn anyway, when we see more. So, this situation here, you can see the anvil had its armor save buffed up. And then, when we get into combat, the hag fights through the ranks to get down to the corner to actually do the fighting and does some wounds to the anvil, which is nice. Berg says, great battle reports. I think the anvil is skirmish, so it doesn't have to close the door on the unit that charged it. So it doesn't have to close the door when it can't close the door itself. Well, I don't know. How much can it even close the door, the anvil? Where would it go to in this situation? So let's go back. They charge in here. They can't close the door, so they end up like this. Would the anvil just roll a bit further down? Is that what you're saying? Because it doesn't technically have a base, so it's still a weird round shape. So would it just roll to here so more of them can fight? Yeah, I have no idea how that works because it's a circle. It doesn't have a flat base. Yeah, very strange. I don't know. It's so weird that they didn't just put the anvil on a square base in this edition. That would be so easy to just put everything on a square base. Why wouldn't they do that? Just make it nice and uniform. Would be such an easy thing to do. And people doing, for modelling opportunities, you could put like pillars on the corners or something like that. It would be so easy. But no. It's round. So it could slide down a bit. Just going to cough here. I should be losing my voice, really, since I've been playing Warhammer all weekend and now immediately start doing a 3-hour live stream afterwards. So, we move on. Organ gun dead, of course, from the Manticore. And then in my turn, the Manticore is shot to smithereens by the Trollhammer torpedoes, which is nice. And the gyrocopter is hiding. The reason the gyrocopter is hiding is because my opponent is intentionally not using his harpies yet. They're still hiding in the top right corner of the screen because they want to come down and claim the middle objective at the end of the game. So if I keep the gyrocopter alive, I can then pop out in my turn 6 and set them on fire and hopefully kill them so they can't claim any victory points. Orchard says, I actually play mine on a base because I want people to not hate the game. Yes, I put mine on a round base just because it's still the shape that it's supposed to be. But it also matches the army better because it's on a base. Yeah, I might tell my opponents not to attack the anvil for convenience. That's easy. It's usually like a flying monster or an eagle or something that attacks the anvil, so you don't worry about how many models can touch it. Very strange. So the anvil is dead, killed by the hag. Dark Riders in the cannon, fighting again. So I think, yeah, it was a draw, I think. So they're stuck there. The Witch Elves overrun, so I've got a chance to shoot them this turn now. And... or actually, no, I think it's the opposing turn now. So they're going to think about turning around to face me. So they have the Steed of Shadow cast on them, so they can fly away if they want. Dark Riders into the flank of the Thunderers. These are the ones that were killing war machines on the hill. And the Chariot slowly trundling into the action still. The Witch Elves turn around to face the Iron Drakes. And over here, okay, this is the time where the cannon wins combat. So I kill a Dark Rider in combat with the cannon crew. They're not doing very well. And then they give ground, and then I pass the restraint test, so the cannon can just stay there and shoot next turn instead. So I'm going to have one more turn of shooting. The Thunderers... I think the Thunderers might actually... Who gave ground there? I think the Thunderers gave ground. And onto my turn 5. So the cannon takes a shot. The Iron Drakes take some shots, kill some Witch Elves, put some wounds on the chariot. It's got one left, which is a recurring theme. The Thunderers reform into a position that they think is going to benefit them if they get charged by the Dark Riders. They'll have a rank, for example. And they're also not going to get hit in the flank this time. So, in fact, did the Dark Riders... Yeah, they did charge them. So I'm wondering why they didn't follow them up. Okay, so then some charges are declared in the Dark Elf turn. Dark Riders in there, Witch Elves in there. Standing and shooting, obviously. Does a little bit, but not that much. Into the Witch Elves, and let's see who gets whooped. The Chariot with one wound left is hiding from my War Machines, as you should. And the Sorceress and the Harpies are in this area now, because the Sorceress killed the Gyrocopter with a spell. Let's have a look. Does look so cool there, just round and stuff. I love the old cannon model. Yeah, let's have a look at the old cannon. Yeah, where was the last picture of it? There we go. Look at that. Stylish old cannon. My original paint job on it wasn't very good, and the crew were very sunburned with the overuse of flesh wash, so I think the repaint has done quite a good job on this cannon. The barrel was originally very dark, so it didn't really stand out from the rest of it, so I used a brighter, kind of brassy colour. So I do like this cannon model. Some of the old War Machines have really characterful crew. I think I'm going to do like a full showcase video, or a video where I just show off all the repaints on my entire dwarf army, and the extra highlights that I've added on them at some point, and talk about that process and just show off pictures of them all. I think that would be alright. I may do that this week actually, because I don't think there'll be an Old World battle report this week, because at the local game club they're doing a Star Wars Shatterpoint night, where they're going to teach people how to play that, a couple of the people at the club, so I'll probably have a go at that this week. So I think I'll look at my dwarf paint jobs for the Old World video this week. Okay, so charges, murder, on the objective with the Harpies, hiding from War Machines, kill, overrun, kill, reposition. So, lost loads of units, but I can still kill stuff. So I'm going to try and kill this chariot in the last turn, get some more points. And I do. Iron Drakes finish that off. Cannon misfires, obviously, so it doesn't get to shoot this turn. And the Harpies secure the win. So, I was thinking about marching my Iron Drakes onto the objective here, because you have to get within 6 inches of it, and that would have denied it to the enemy. However, that would deny them 200 points, and I found out that the chariot is actually worth more than 200 points. So killing the chariot is actually worth more than denying them the central objective. And I couldn't do both reliably, because the cannon was very likely to miss and not kill that thing. So it's a good job the Iron Drakes did stay here to help out. And when I measured to make sure, they were about 2mm short of being able to claim it anyway. So it's a good job that they decided to kill the chariot and get the points for that. So, not a lot left on either side, it has to be said. That was a bloodbath. And let's have a look what that means for the scores, because there are some enemy units left that are more significant than mine. So the final score for that one is... So I apparently killed 1,225 points, which is a decent number, but there are expensive units still alive. The Witch Elves, the Hag, the Sorceress, and then some cheaper chaff units. I've only got the Cannon and some Iron Drakes, so my opponent got 2,339, which we calculated out to a 16-4 win to the Dark Elves. So again, Dwarves, good at killing some stuff, but not great at surviving, we're finding out with this gun line. And we go into the final game, but before that, let's have a look at some armies out on display during lunchtime on day 2 for voting for the best army. Now, I think this wyvern fell off its base, so this one is not getting a fair judgment, is it? So I did get a few close-ups anyway, so some nice orcs and goblin action there by the looks of things. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's not, it's wood elves. I was just thrown off because I thought this was a wyvern. It's a dragon, and I thought those were wolf riders. Because they're wolves, obviously, but it is wood elves. There you go, look at that. They just happen to be riding on wolves. And then, yeah, you can see the hands for the dragon, actually, I think. Or is that... Can you? Yeah, that's got to be a hand there, hasn't it? Then we have got some lovely orcs and goblins, very dark. Black orcs. Some savage orcs at the back there. We've got some beastmen. And I have played against some of this army at the gaming club. 2 gorgons, very scary. And there's a giant in there now. This is actually the... Is it the bone grinder? Is it called the giant? The really big one? We've got some friendly dwarves who are much more grim looking and snow covered than mine. Very cool as well. Some of these miniatures are GW. The Iron Drakes are. I'm guessing that a lot of the others are probably Highland miniatures, because that's what everyone seems to be using now, because dwarves just aren't available to buy yet. Then we have got some lovely high elves with some dragons, so not that lovely. We have got some more high elves with some dragons. Seems to be a theme going on here. Are they avatars of war? These are avatars of war, are they? Cool. Then we've got some vampire counts. And I'm going to assume that the movement trays are eventually going to get painted to match the bases as well, because these are very cool looking skeletons. Lizardmen, which is the army I faced on day 1, so I've got some more close-ups here. So you can see very nice paint jobs on these stegodons. The old Lizardmen, they were some of the coolest stuff you were ever going to see in the 90s. And there was some stiff competition for brightly coloured armies back then as well, because people did just go nuts with the colours all across Games Workshop products. So for the Lizardmen to stand out having brightly coloured armies, that tells you how cool the models were back then. And look at that. Very cool indeed. Then we've got the Brettonians that I also faced, and I really like the work on these as well. I think these are very cool, particularly some of the heroes. Then we have got the Warriors of Chaos that I also faced with this hideous 2-headed dragon. Visibly Riley says, Lizardmen are still a standout if you want painting prizes in AOS due to the colour pop. Great army. Yes. Lizards that are colourful are always going to be popular. We've got some horrible screaming vampire counts. We've got some Tomb Kings with some lovely skeletons. Yes, this is the army I faced. I faced similar list to this twice now at the gaming club with the Terrorgeists and loads of skeletons and Heinrich on the Mortis engine. Very scary. Then we've got, these are nice on the Tomb King side there. But more Tomb Kings with some big bone dragons and a Necro Sphinx and more skeletons. Look at that. Very cool. Then we've got some orcs and goblins with an Arachnarok and some goblin war machines. Loads of fanatics, which seems to be the way to go. They're very good now. Nice wyvern there. Then we have got some Empire. So this is a really interesting Empire list because it's got some knights and it's got some cannons and it's got some level 4 wizards and engineers. I think that is the whole army. 3 level 4 wizards, I think, and 3 cannons, 2 volley guns, 3 engineers. The volley guns can use the engineer's ballistic skill in the Empire list, which is horrendously jealousy-inducing for a dwarf player. Because we have these engineers that have great ballistic skill, but they can only use it to fire their crummy handgun instead of lending it to a bolt thrower or an organ gun. And yeah, this seems like it'd be a cool list to come up against for my dwarves. That'd be a really fun battle, War Machine versus War Machine, I think. If I even shot at them, I'd probably just shoot the knights. Look at that. Very cool. Then we have got a Beasts of Chaos. Or Beastmen, what are they called now? Beastmen Bray Herds, I think that's what they're called in the old world, isn't it? So, I'm not even going to pretend to know what half these units are, though. But you can see that some of them are clearly Beastmen. Some very cool models there. Including some horrible swamp monster. So, I think this one won the Coolest Army Award. Very cool indeed. Then we have got some... I think this is Vampire Counts. Yeah, we've got some Terrorgeist alternative models there. And a couple of Mortis Engines and Banshees. So, lots of Screams. Very scary. And those look like some Grave Guard there. Very nice. Then we've got some more Undead. Some more Vampire Counts. So if you thought Terrorgeists were popular, you were right. Double Terrorgeist Mortis Engine again. That seems to be the thing. Very snowy, very cool, these ones as well. And then there's the Dark Elves with the lovely Chariot. And for some reason, I'm going to have to start the photos again because it's not letting me go any further on the slideshow. So I'm going to put up my thumbnail temporarily while I close the slideshow and reopen it at the point where I left off. I don't know, maybe it gets worn out after like 600 pictures or however many we've looked at. So there we go. So there's the lovely elves of the dark variety. So in the final round, let me pull up the opposing list. So it's Warriors of Chaos again. Obviously you're going to see a lot of those because many of the models are available for the Age of Sigmar range, so people have them. And they were one of the more popular armies, I think, in Warhammer Fantasy back in the day anyway, so people may have had them left over. They're certainly one of the armies I would consider getting. I actually was on eBay recently looking for metal dragon ogres. I'm always keeping my eye open for those because I think they're really cool and I would like to have 6 of them ideally for a Chaos Warriors army. And then there was an eBay listing with 6 of them for about £100, which is actually a really good price by eBay standards. They usually go for quite a lot each. But the problem was, there's dwarves about to come out, so I don't have loads of money to throw around. And also, the eBay listing, some of the weapons looked a bit bent. So I thought, those weapons might be quite fragile now. If they've been bent a few times and they're old and used, they might be not in the best condition. And if the weapons fall off, that's not great. So that's immediately a couple of them that could be worthless immediately. So I thought, I'm not going to buy them. No matter how tempting it is, I would have had to paint strip them as well. So I'm just going to hold out and wait for... see if GW bring them back on made to order. And if they don't, I'll just keep scouring eBay until the perfect ones show up. At a moment that I actually have money. So I will do a Chaos Warriors army eventually. Warhammer Orchard says, you could 3D print the weapons. I would like to keep my armies, at least for the old world, mostly pure and mainly for nostalgia reasons, but also for using them potentially at Warhammer World events. So I want to keep them pure for that reason. Even though most of the tournaments I attend are going to be at the TSN arena, I do plan to go to some at Warhammer World, so I want to keep them nice and pure for that. And obviously I just like the models that I used to look at in the magazine longingly when I was a youngster, reading the White Dwarf magazine, being a cool kid at school, reading that in the library. And I must have been quite cool because there were a couple of other people that also read White Dwarf at school back then. So, up against the disgusting Forces of Chaos again. Warriors of Chaos. There is not a giant evil Chaos Lord this time. What do we have instead? Well, we have a 445 point Demon Prince instead. So I'll get to the picture of that stuff. So there's the Demon Prince. So The Demon Prince is the one that has 1,000,000 saves, but it has way less wounds than the Lord on Dragon. So it doesn't have that many wounds, but there's mostly Mark of Nurgle in this army. So it has it flies, the Demon Prince. It's got Armour of Meteoric Iron, so the save that can't be reduced. And it also has I think this also has a ward save and a regeneration save as well. There is a Sorcerer who is in this unit, I think, which is a unit of Chaos Warriors, 14 of them, with Mark of Nurgle. He's in that unit. And that Sorcerer has... It's only level 2, though. So there's a level 4 Demon Prince and then a level 2 Sorcerer. There is some Warhounds. 2 of them have the... How are they described here? They're like handlers, aren't they? Yeah, Warhound Handler. So that slows them down, but they can use higher leadership then. And then 2 without handlers. On the side there are some Chaos Knights, and they are in a marching column, because they were obviously thinking about getting up the table faster. And are they standard knights or are they chosen? Let's see. They are chosen Nurgle Knights. There is... Here, there is... Let's see, that is a Gore Beast Chariot, I think, there. That right there. There's a Dragon Ogre, which is the Dragon Ogre champion on its own. Very cool. And then there are some more Warhounds there. And over on this side... Hold on, I think this one's actually a chariot. There are 2 chariots in here. So we've got... Yes, this one I think is the Aspiring Champion on a chariot. So this one's also got the Mark of Nurgle. Yeah, so he's on a Gore Beast chariot. And has the Ruby Ring of Ruin, which has some Fireball. Or is it that one that's the champion? I don't know which one's which. They're both chariots, though. So, you can see, if we go back to the wide shot, I've got my Rangers out here before the Vanguard moves went up. So really, they're blocking off this side. There's some hard-hitting stuff there. But there's nothing that the Rangers don't like their chances against, because none of this stuff has a huge amount of wounds. So if any of them get into combat with the Rangers, they are at risk. And then it's a long way from the Rangers to the Thunderers who are behind them. And there's a cannon looking this way as well. Now, this is also a very rare situation where we have hills in the deployment zone in the middle. People never pick this card. So we don't usually end up with it because people don't want dwarves on a hill. However, what my opponent has obviously realised is that there are 2 woods which are outside of the deployment zone and can be used for blocking lines of sight. So maybe just looking at the hills, you're not giving this map a chance by ruling it out immediately, when actually there's some good line of sight blocking here. So, it seems to be a Nurgle purist army, yes. Got 2 organ guns on the hill. They're on the hill because they want to be able to see to both sides, and the enemy only had mostly chaff units down when I'd finished deploying. So the cool stuff was then able to go nowhere near the organ guns. But they're going to control the centre quite well, and obviously each one can shoot to the side as well. The cannon here, which even though it can't hit your own guys, or can't see past your own guys there is something really interesting with the cannon that I'll get to when it fires in a minute, but it's a bizarre rules conundrum, which we did come up with a solution for, but we're not 100% sure if it's correct. So we can look forward to that in a moment. Got the Iron Drakes there, and the anvil on the hill. The Quarrelers are actually going to move off the hill to make space to allow the anvil to use its magic missile to shoot things. And the Quarrelers, because there's not much here to fight, they're just going to walk to a better position and then join in the fight. Hammerers have started off quite wide, in case any enemies get the idea of maybe flying 24 inches to land in front of them again, like the Witch Elves did. And the Bolt Thrower here behind the Iron Drakes, because they're going to move. And 1 cannon all the way out on the left on its own. So, let's get to turn 1, which I get, so I'm going to start blasting. I immediately gun down the dogs and take a wound off those ones as well, or 2 wounds maybe. So here's the cannon situation. Let me show you where the cannon was. So, here's the cannon. In the first turn, the cannon wants to shoot something. Now, you can't see beyond your own troops, so the cannonball can go there. Now, I don't see anything in the rules that says you can't hit your own models. I can see that it says you can't hit units that are in combat. However, if it says, if it also specifies that you can't intentionally risk hitting your own models, then does that mean that putting it here is fine? Because that means it can't physically hit this unit. Because if it rolls a misfire, it just stops. And if it rolls a 2, it clears them and lands there, so it can't physically hit them. So, does that mean I'm allowed to put the cannonball there? Would I also be allowed to put the cannonball there if this unit was in combat with something here? So it couldn't physically hit either of the units in combat. But the line of the cannonball does pass across them. So the point is there, so the minimum distance that it's going to start is there if I roll a 2, and then it would bounce from there. So am I allowed to put the cannonball there? What do you think? So we scoured through the rules and we got the TO to check. Not that it's important, because I'm only trying to shoot one dog, but it's just good to know for the future. So we decided that you can do it. If you guess there, you have 0 chance of hitting your own troops, so even if hitting your own troops is something you're not allowed to do, you're not actually risking it by putting the cannonball there, because it can't physically hit them. So we decide it's allowed, so it bounces through, kills a dog. Woohoo. So that's good to know if that is true. If it's wrong, I'm sure someone in the chat or the comments will correct me, because that is quite a big deal if that's the case, because it allows you to screen with cannons much more effectively. You can put your own troops in front of them as long as you're far enough, close enough to the enemy so that you can put the ball behind them, bounce, or the first landing spot of the cannonball is beyond you, and then you can bounce. And I agree, Orchard, it doesn't feel right, it feels weird, but if that is the way the rules work, then that's what we have to deal with. So if there's anything forbidding that from taking place, then let me know. But it feels like that is correct. So if you have a single line, you physically can't hit the first guy, because you can't hit a point here. You're either going to stop there or start there. Very interesting. So let's go into my shooting. So dog's dead, a few dogs dead there. Organ guns start blasting. They blast away some more dogs, who then flee off the table with the remaining 1 or 2 that they had. Cannon shoots, puts a couple of wounds onto this chariot on the left. It's that one there from the cannon here. And that's a decent start, killed some chaff, got in a good position. So, what is going to happen now in the Chaos turn? So, I think +1 toughness spell is being put onto various things. And did I even mention these guys? I don't think I did. These are Chaos Ogres, 3 of them. There you go. And they have Mark of Nurgle as well. So everyone's moving up into a threatening position. And you'll notice that they're not immediately charging. So the knights couldn't charge because they were in marching column. And they got out of marching column because I think they're drilled as well, these knights. So they could only go 1 extra wide because they were right up to the board edge. So that means they couldn't charge this turn, I think. Or maybe they could have done actually at 3 wide. I think you can then charge, can't you? Because that's no longer a marching column. But I think 3 with 2 behind, that's not a marching column, is it? So maybe they could have charged then, but maybe they thought that was a terrible idea to charge in on their own into the Rangers, because there'd be a stand and shoot, and then only 3 knights hitting, so they wouldn't kill that many of them, and then they'd get punched in the face with great weapons. So you can see the level 4 Demon Prince is hiding behind the woods from the war machines, which is probably a good idea. And everyone else is just gathered waiting to try and kill them. My gyrocopter's hiding behind the woods there as well, so it's not going to get charged by any of this madness. You can see... Who's that skirmishing unit? I don't know if I even mentioned them either. So there are some marauders. I don't think I mentioned them. So there's just 8 of them hanging out there. So everyone poised to go and kill the Rangers next turn. And you can see that I have... On my turn I moved the hammerers up as well, because the only unit worth fighting in the middle is over there, and they're staying back. So my plan is to, late in the game, I want to try and draw them out so I can shoot them. I don't really want to fight them with the hammerers, because I don't know if that will go well for me, because the hammerers are quite fragile. So turn 2 for me. Cannon shoots again. Flame template, and I managed to kill some of these marauders and the others run away. I kill one of the Chaos Ogres with my cannon, I think. Move the hammerers up again, buff their armour with the Anvil of Doom. Question: can a cannon target a point on the ground if another unit lies between it and that point? So a cannon can only target a spot on the ground that it can see. Perfidy says, doesn't drill happen after you've declared your charge and you can't declare where much can't? So that's something they clarified in the FAQ actually, so that you can redress your ranks before you declare the charge. So that you can go from marching column into a wider frontage and then declare a charge. They clarified that in the FAQ, which is very handy for hammerers because they can take drilled. Let's see, Warhammer Orchard. Answer: not unless the cannon is on a hill and the unit is not. However, as above, a stone thrower can if it chooses to fire indirectly. Yes, the cannon has to hit a point it can see. But it doesn't say that you can't draw the line, the potential line of it over friendly troops. Even if they, or through combat if those units can't physically be hit by it. So if you're just going over one wide or one deep unit. So it can't physically touch them. And we have got some... I think this guy actually charged... Okay, no, I remember what happened. So, my rangers had a conundrum. Because they could shoot one of these units and then get charged by all of them. And they're going to be too close, so no standing and shooting, which is another reason not to charge straight into them. Instead, I decided, you know what, I'm going to make a disordered charge into the Demon Prince, because I think he's only got a few wounds. So, I made the charge, I couldn't close the door on him, so they do go to a funny angle. And I ended up, sadly, not doing any wounds to him. And he killed 4, and I ended up falling back a bit and going to the edge, and then I got charged by everything in the next turn. So I think it was worth the risk, because I think with their great weapons they could have done damage to him, and I wouldn't have been able to shoot him because he was in my flank. So I would have had to shoot one of these other units instead. So I thought this would be a good chance to get him, because he could just hide here for the whole game. So I might get a chance to put wounds on him now, and it didn't work, sadly. And you can see the Chaos Ogres are closing in on my cannon down there, which is not very nice of them. And this guy, because he's wounded, this chariot, is not popping out to play. He's just hiding there for now. And the Dragon Ogre heading towards the Thunderers, because my Rangers all get killed, so everyone's just going forward, waiting to strike again. So I'm going to have another go to shoot them at least. And look how close they are now. So I'm going to have to grape shot them into my turn 3. So all the shooting on this side. I lose an Iron Drake by moving into the woods, which is hilarious. And I put some wounds onto the Dragon Ogre with my shooting. And I kill another knight, I think, as well. The Hammerers turn to face this way. So this is my fiendish plan. I want these Chaos Warriors to think, ooh, there's a juicy flank. I'm going to come out and threaten it. And force you to turn to look at me. And then someone else will be able to come in and hit you in the flank, maybe. But what I'm actually hoping is that they come out just so I can shoot them. So the Quarrelers are also looking there as well. So it's obviously bait, but is it juicy enough to take? We'll find out. Stephen says, I like putting throwing axes on rangers to get the quick shot. More points, yes. And it's not much, it's not many more points. I would have to maybe drop a ranger to put throwing axes on them, so I think that would be worth it actually. So I think I will do that from now on. I haven't tried it yet. All my shooting murders the Chaos Ogres, even though the cannon misfired when it was trying to grape shot them. Gyrocopter scorches another marauder, but only one, sadly. And I realise I made a mistake now with the gyrocopter, so positioning it here instead of here means that when they charge it, I can't retreat because I risk running off the table. So it's just a bit sloppy there. Could have just left it here and flamed them, and then I'd be fleeing into a safe area, like there, rather than potentially off the table. So it means I'm going to have to hold if they charge me now, which is sad. So it's not looking too bad at the moment, done some decent damage with the shooting, but this flank is still very scary. But it's not hitting significant troops of mine. The Rangers were significant, but they're already dead now. And I'm thinking probably charging into the big guy probably wasn't worth it. But that's only in hindsight because I didn't wound him. They could have killed something with their shooting. Then, loads of charges declared into the Thunderers. And a charge from the Demon Prince declared into the Iron Drakes. So they're going to flee. Because I was going to stand and shoot, but we realised that actually only one of them's in the woods. So most of them can't actually see him to stand and shoot. So I don't think that's a thing they can do. So they flee instead. And it tries to redirect the charge into the cannon. So let's see if these charges make it. The Demon Prince does make it in with a very high charge into the cannon. And the other three make it into the Thunderers. So they're going to get munched. Gyrocopter is charged by the Marauders. What exactly is going on in woods in the old world? They're ridiculously dangerous. Yes, they are. Terrain is something that they may tweak with time in the old world as well. Because at the moment, it seems like a piece of terrain doesn't do that much for you, or it's the most horrifying thing in the world and it just kills you immediately. So it's interesting. The terrain rules, I think, some of them don't come up because we're playing the same terrain maps a lot at the TSN events, because they have set maps and people generally pick the same one, because one benefits shooting armies, one is usually negative to shooting armies, so it's generally the one in the middle that gets picked. So I'd be interested to see some more varied terrain layouts in the future as well, which could lead to some more interactions with the terrain that aren't the same thing that we always see. I'm going to check in on the poll for the best dwarf war machine in the old world, and no one has complained that the flame cannon isn't on there. The grudge thrower has gone up to 7%. The organ gun is still well in the lead at 60%, and I would agree with that. I know some people don't rate the organ gun at all because it's expensive, but I really like it. Even if you don't take an engineer, it's still extremely unlikely to blow itself up. So on that basis, it's better than a cannon. And with an engineer, you're virtually guaranteed to never blow up. And the worst thing that's going to happen is that maybe you'll roll like a 6 and a 2, and then you'll re-roll the 2 with the engineer, and it'll turn into a misfire. But still, you don't explode, and it's worth the risk at that stage. Depending what you're shooting and how many shots you need, obviously. So, cannon gets killed by the Demon Prince, but he's in a position for me to shoot now. Gyrocopter wins the combat against the Marauders and chooses not to go after them. And the Thunderers are dead. And so here's an interesting situation. With the overrun, because I think there was maybe one Thunderer left, and the others were pursuing him to kill him. You run away from the centre of the highest unit strength enemy force, perhaps? Which is that unit on the end. So centre to centre is like here. So does that mean that they flee along this line towards the Demon Prince? Does anyone think that is incorrect? Because that's the unit with the most unit strength on the end there, and the centre is here. So do they flee in that direction? Is that right? If that's wrong, then let me know in the chat to your understanding of the rules, because then the pursuits go that way as well. Perfidy says, I think that's theoretically correct. Yes. Obscure Minator, do you think it would be worth to not take organ guns and go all Iron Drakes? There is definitely an argument for that, because Iron Drakes are very good. At the moment, I only have 10 of them, so I don't have that option right now. But I would definitely consider getting another box of Iron Drakes to at least have the option of running 4 units in a list, and occasionally not taking organ guns. I just really like the organ guns. I've always liked them. They've always been one of my favourite units. I had... The old organ gun that I've got now is not the same one that I had back in the 90s when I first started Dwarves. I've only got a few models left from that army when I started them in the mid-90s. I had the organ gun. The cannon that I've got in this army, the old cannon, is actually one of the few surviving models from that first ever attempt at a dwarf army. I had old metal quarrelers and thunderers, some of which still survive in this army. Some of the Thunderers, you can still see some old ones in there. But I had some even older ones than that with the funny hats as well. And what else did I have back in the day? I had the plastic dwarf warriors, the single pose ones. I had some slayers, but not many. I might have only had like a command group and never finished off the full unit. I did have some slayers though. But I got rid of most of those because I moved on to Chaos Warriors in the late 90s. And then when I started Dwarves again in about year 2000, that was when they got their new book in, which edition would it have been? Year 2000. Would that be 5th or 6th edition? And then they had the multi-part plastic kits, where you got the kit that could make the warriors with shields, the warriors with great weapons, or crossbows. So that was a really fun kit, multi-part, and those were the first kits that came with movement trays as well. I think the first one was the Chaos Warriors regiment that came with a movement tray. That was the first one. You got 12 Chaos Warriors and a tray for them to go on, and that was like a dream back then, because they just didn't sell movement trays prior to that, as far as I'm aware, so you just had to push everything around or put them on a piece of card or something. And units did get bigger over time as well through editions, so movement trays became more important. But I remember not having movement trays with a goblin army at one point. That was quite funny. So yeah, the old organ gun was one of my favourite models, which is something I did get rid of, sadly, but I did buy it again, the old organ gun, when I started my... I may have bought that when I got back into Warhammer in 2011-ish. I think I picked that one up on eBay. But it's the same model. So, what am I going to do in this turn? I'm going to be shooting things. So, turn 4 for me. Organ gun. So, this organ gun moves. Now, this is controversial, but this organ gun couldn't see anything, because it is on a hill and none of the enemies are large targets. So it moves out the way, so next turn it'll be able to shoot, and it also leaves space for the anvil to draw line of sight between them to the enemy as well. This one can shoot. So I do some wounds, I kill a knight or two, I think, do some wounds around the place, and not much though. Quite a disappointing shooting round. Kill another one of them, and yeah, so at this point, the gyrocopter should definitely be moving, because he is actually facing this way now, this guy. So I should be moving to here before shooting, because I'm going to allow both of them to charge me now, so that's just silly on my part. I don't think I noticed that this guy had turned round. So, the shooting doesn't do much this turn, unfortunately, and it's just not that reliable, the shooting, sadly. I think the organ gun, it was one of those situations where I rolled like a 2 and another 2, and then used the engineer to re-roll one of them, and then it turned into a misfire. So it was 2 shots at -1 to hit. So it does happen sometimes, but there have been other times also where I'm rolling 18 dice with it, so it balances out. Turn 4 for the enemy. So, charging into the Iron Drakes, charging into the gyrocopter, and I stand and shoot but don't do much. And obviously the other units are just getting in position to charge other things next turn, so I'm going to have one more chance with a couple of organ guns to blast them. And the doggies are positioning themselves to annoy the hammerers. So what they're thinking is that they're blocking a charge into this chariot. However, they are not, because the hammerers can take off a unit, take off a model from the flank by redressing the ranks before charging, so they can actually make it to that thing. I will be able to declare a charge there. The rangers are just repositioning as well. You'll notice that these guys are now getting into the action. So there is the opportunity for me to maybe shoot them at some point, but I was hoping that this flank wouldn't be so terrifying when they did emerge. But they're quite slow, so I think I'll be able to stay away from them. Now, the gyrocopter gets killed, which is sad, but this thing's still out in the open. It overruns. My Iron Drakes in combat, let's see, so that's here. The Iron Drakes flee, and they are not caught by the Demon Prince, so that's nice. So he's now sitting out in the open. Turn 5 for me. So, let's start blasting. What's this? A unit left with 1 wound? That's not surprising. So I did declare a charge with the hammerers there, but it chose to flee. and I then started blasting it and did a few wounds, but it's still got one left. This cannon, I think this chariot made its armor save against the cannon. And yeah, so the hammerers redirected their charge into the dogs and killed them, and then reformed to face this way very wide, which means that the Chaos Warriors are not in range to charge them next turn. So I'm not worried about facing away from them at the moment. And yeah, so the War Machines were quite disappointing. I think my opponent was using the old, or are they even old? Their official GW Vampire Counts dice with a bat, like a wing on them. And I was seeing that wing symbol an awful lot for the armor saves, I remember thinking. So it's very easy to spot when it comes up though, so you can immediately see when it made a 6-up save, the dice. It stands out a lot compared to the dots. So I think that's why it was so memorable. So this guy, I don't think he's taken a wound yet. And this guy's just saving cannonballs. And there have been times when I've been blasting away at the knights, and they need like a 5+, and all of them made it, I think. And then this guy's on his final wound, still alive as well. So if... the problem with shooting, if it doesn't go your way by even a little bit, and you then get charged, you die. It's not the same as a combat army, because you want to be in there fighting anyway, so the consequence of you not killing something means they just get to hit you a bit harder. But if you're built for the grind, then you expect to get hit anyway. If you're shooting somebody, you get that one chance, maybe a couple of chances if you're lucky, but if you don't entirely kill them and they get to you, you're not built for the fight, unless you're a unit of rangers. So War Machines, once they get charged by even a knight, there's a good chance they're going to lose the combat. And at that point they're no longer shooting because they're in combat, and eventually they're going to die. So that is the issue with a gun line. You get less chances to do the thing you want to do. Unless the enemy keeps failing charges, which is obviously nice. Turn 5 for Chaos Warriors. So this guy turns around a bit, he rallies, and I think they're stacking up the Chaos Gods gifts that are being dispatched onto these are being stacked up with cards, so they're like getting extra initiative, attacks, and all kinds of stuff. Charges are declared into the Iron Drakes, into the Organ Gun, and that is a successful charge into the Organ Gun and into the Iron Drakes. And this, hold on, okay, so they charged this Organ Gun, and what was going to happen was they would charge into the front of the Organ Gun, then kill it and overrun into the second one, taking out or tying up one Organ Gun and killing the other. So this one's never going to be able to shoot then. So I think I'm just going to flee with the first Organ Gun, let them redirect into the second one, so at least this one's over here somewhere and will still be alive, even if it can't shoot. I would rather have one that's out of the danger zone, because this one's going to get tied up anyway. And if they overrun into the Anvil actually has a decent chance at maybe doing something against them and standing up to them with its high toughness. So I run away with one of them, they get into this one. So that one's fled over there. So again, the Organ Guns are jet powered when fleeing and get a really big distance. This guy's gone off to hide because he's down to his final wound and would just be giving up points. I think that is a slight issue with... is it an issue with the game, or is it purely an issue with gun lines? So with gun lines, obviously, if you get the enemy down to one wound, they are going to hide, and you can't chase them because you're static. So if they get out of your sight, you're just not scoring points for them. So I think the slight issue with the game is that it's kind of all or nothing, because the small amount of points you get for whittling a unit down to not many models left isn't very significant. And for monsters and characters, you don't get anything unless you fully kill them. So I think having purely killing things as the only way of winning does have flaws. It's straightforward and simple for a very complicated rule set that this is, so I can understand starting with that. I would like to see them add more win conditions at some point. Not every game has to be played that way, but I think it would add variety. And probably because I've played a lot of Kings of War, where every mission pretty much has some kind of objective, like control table sections, or carry tokens around on the table and hold onto them on your units at the end. or get more of your units into the enemy half. And it changes list building, obviously, because you're not purely trying to kill things. You have to think, do I have units that can hold areas? Do I have units that can successfully carry tokens around? Perfidy says you should get points for reducing monsters and characters to below 50% starting wounds. I think that sounds alright to me. Miss Junk's Bits. I think the Empire organ gun had 2 rows. The Empire organ gun, 2 rows. You may have to clarify what you mean by that. So, I was looking actually at the rules for the organ gun in the Old Dwarf book from, I'm going to guess, 4th edition, which is the blue. It was a nice blue one of my favourite books, that Old Dwarf Army book. And I was looking to see if organ guns could ever take runes. And back then, the runes were just standard, here are the engineering runes. Some of them said this can be put on a cannon, some of them didn't say, so I think you could just put them on any machine. I couldn't find anything that said you couldn't put them on organ guns and flame cannons back then, but then in the next book after that, it then lists which machines can take runes and which can't. So definitely from the next book, organ guns couldn't have runes. Back in the day, I think they could. The old metal dwarf organ gun had a buff guy carrying a barrel. Yes, that is one I've got, which is here. This guy has the barrel there with his massive beard, and here is, I think he's shirtless. And then there's this guy in his nice little helmet. There is an even older dwarf organ gun than this, which has loads of spikes on it, which I would also like to get. Not that I could fathom using 3 in a list, surely, but the crew on that one looked very cool as well. The old War Machine crew are so much cooler than these ones, these multi-part ones. I suppose the one guy on the end, the bald guy there, looks pretty cool, but the rest of them, not very exciting. The old one's so characterful. The middle one there, with his teeth out, he looks really cool as well. Which you'll see all these in glorious detail when I do a video showing off my entire army, by the way. Organ guns are definitely too newfangled for runes. Certainly in the old world they are. They're even older than they were in the old world, which isn't as old as the old world. So the engineer gets overrun into by the demon prince, and the organ gun is killed there and overrun into the anvil with the knights. So, what do I want to do now? Well, I want to charge the demon prince with the hammerers. That sounds like a great idea. They will probably eat him for breakfast with all those attacks on the charge. And everyone else can just shoot other stuff. However, you will notice the anvil gets killed. And yeah. So the hammers failed their charge again. So they didn't need to do much of a wheel to actually line up to hit this guy. It was only like a couple of millimeters. So it wasn't even a full inch taken off. So they needed to roll, I think, a 2 or a 3 or a 4 on one of the dice to make it in on the charge. And I think I rolled a double 2 again. So they fail this charge. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so he kills the engineer, overruns into the quarrelers. And what's that? Naked human legs on a live stream. I don't know whose they are. Turn 6 for chaos. Killing most of the quarrelers. But there's still a champion left. And charging the chaos warriors into the rear of the hammerers. But obviously I'm not going to lose the whole unit, and they're stubborn, so they're not going to be killed in one round, so they just fall back to there. And that's the end of the game. So there's lots of expensive units left alive. Demon Prince, Hammerers, Chaos Warriors. And lots of things that are almost dead. The 2 chariots have barely any wounds left on them, but they're able to hide, because I can't chase them down with anything. I've got a cannon totally untouched in the corner as well. I've got this organ gun alive, iron drakes, so there's quite a bit alive on both sides, but the chaos have got more stuff alive, sadly, because they've just taken loads of wounds but not died. So let's look at the final result on the app here. In fact, I'm not even on the Best Coast Pairings app. I'm on the website, because the app is garbage and doesn't work anymore. So, my opponent informs me of the hilarious news that despite doing 1 million wounds during the game to different things, that might be an exaggeration, I only have 309 points. Wow, wow, wow. So, what did I actually kill? I killed the Dragon Ogre and some Warhounds, and that might be it. Because the single Marauder is still alive for some reason. He's alive on 1 wound. He's alive with a couple of wounds left, I think. This guy never took any wounds somehow. And these Knights survived being shot at repeatedly by organ guns. And yeah, so barely anything actually died completely in the end. So that's very sad. And my opponent got 1,571 points via actually finishing off units. So that led to a 16-4 in favour of the vile, evil forces of chaos. So let me look at the placings at the end here, see where I finished. So 22 players, and I was in a decent position at the end of day 1, and then it all came tumbling down with some difficult games against Warriors of Chaos, and I ended up in 18th place. Let's see where the other dwarf player finished. The other dwarf player finished in... where is it? Can't even see it on here. It must be there somewhere. Oh, there we go. 7th place. So that other dwarf list actually got 3 wins and 2 losses, so that's pretty good. Let's have a look. Oh, you can actually see the stats here and what the army played against. So, oh, it did actually play against one of the double Terrorgeist lists. Did it win that game? Let's see. Let me see here. Just tapping through here. I'm just interested to see this now. Doesn't really affect my games or list at all. No, that was a loss against the Terrorgeist list for the other dwarves. And I'll tell you who won the event overall. That was Vampire Counts, and then High Elves after that, then Orcs and Goblins, then Beastmen, Warriors of Chaos. Empire finished 6th. Who else? Who finished near the bottom? Vampire Counts actually finished last and second last as well, so they don't have it all their own way. Brettonians then, and High Elves, and then we get to my dwarves. So, is the dwarf gunline doomed? Is another question. I would say at the moment it is. Jesse says, where did the Wood Elves come? Let's find the Wood Elves. I can't see the Wood Elves. So what I'm going to guess is that the Wood Elves could have possibly been someone who maybe had to go early and wasn't in the standings, or a spare player list or something. I can't spot it here. Yeah, because I definitely don't see Wood Elves in the final standings here. Unless it was representing something else, which is always possible. So, gunline. Issues. Stuff that flies. It's very easy to build an obscenely powerful big flying monster hero with 1 million different saving throws. So what can you do? Because if you're firing with really good AP, AP2 or AP3 should be good. But on average, if you're forcing it to make 3 consecutive 5+ saves, on average, it'll never take a wound, because it should be saving all of those. Because out of making those 3 saves, it should be picking up 1 of them. So it should never get wounded by anything over the course of the game, on average. Obviously it will take wounds, because you are going to... Sometimes you'll pass the first save, sometimes you won't pass any of them. But on average, 3 saves, you should make one of those, which is all you need to make to stop the wound going through. So those things are very difficult to stop. And they're usually flying, so it's very difficult to engage them on your terms. So they're going to hit what they want generally. So that's why the 2 cannons were added to this list, to give me more chances to put more wounds on those things, make them take more saves, make them fail more of them. But then you see the Chaos one with 10 wounds, and you think, how? How is anything going to get through that? Obviously, people do. Some people can get through it, but I was told actually when I put 4 wounds on that Chaos Lord, that was the most damage anyone had done to it at the tournament up to that point. So just ignoring it seems like the best option. But then you're just letting it gobble up something every turn. And that's not ideal. A combat dwarf army has issues with speed and the enemy just choosing not to engage you, because you can't force them to if you're not bringing enough guns. So you have to bring enough guns to get them closer to you, but enough combat stuff so that they don't just gobble through your entire lines when they get there, which is a difficult balance to strike. I do have miners. Miners are in the old world, yes, to answer the chat there. They are very hit and, well, in the old world I think they're very miss, because they come on and you can take a steam drill, so you can quite reliably bring them onto the table, but the issue is the enemy just walk very slowly away from them and they can't catch them, because they're dwarves on foot who are very slow, and that is an issue for them. You can't bring them on that close to the enemy. And if the enemy knows you've got miners, they'll probably position themselves in such a way that you can't get them in a good spot. So, yeah, I don't really like the miners, sadly, which is sad because I really like the models. I think they're the ones I've got, I think, are the Battle for Skull Pass miners, because they're single pose. And then I've also got the old classic Dwarf Lords of Legend from the 80s as the champion, the one with the pickaxe. So I really like the unit. I think they look amazing with the candles on their heads, but I can't see how to use them, sadly. I may give them another try to see if I can get something out of them. People have suggested running them in marching column when they come on. So yeah, you need enough guns, as Stephen says here, enough guns to keep them honest, with enough points left over to actually fight their army. So yeah, this is a balance that I'm going to try to strike with my next dwarf lists. So I'm going to probably ditch the cannons. Yes, miners would be very good against war machines, but we're not really in a war machine world at the moment. We're not seeing a lot of them out there. Obviously there was that one Empire list at this event, but I didn't get to face that. So I'm thinking of ditching the cannons, saving those points, keeping probably the organ guns as the war machines of choice. The bolt throw is not very expensive, so that can always stay, potentially. Ditching some of my shooting otherwise, so maybe dropping Thunderers or Quarrelers, a larger unit of Rangers, I think, and maybe some Dwarf Warriors who can do some fighting. Dwarf Warriors are a tricky one, because if you run them in a unit that's too small, they're basically worthless, and if you run them in a unit that's big, that's in any way scary, the enemy can avoid them easily. And they still don't stand much of a chance against elite enemy units. I do have some great weapon warriors, but that means adding highlights to another unit. I was kind of leaving them in the cupboard for now, not painting them, because I don't think great weapon dwarf warriors are that useful, but maybe. I've got iron breakers as well that I can bring in. I can make a decently fighty unit of iron breakers and hammerers. The problem is, will anyone fight them, or will they just avoid them and pick off my weak stuff? Do you need more than 2 fighter units? So that's when the Dwarf Warriors come in. So that gives me 3 fighting blocks. If I have miners, that can maybe be 4 fighting units. But at that point, am I so down on guns that the enemy is not going to come towards me? Well, I have to use my rangers in a different role in that list. Rather than a speed bump to keep people away from my shooting, I actually want the enemy to get closer to me so I can fight them. So I use the rangers in a really different role, and maybe put them behind stuff instead of as a speed bump. Interesting. Jesse says, what about Longbeards? I don't have any Longbeard models. Obviously you can use pretty much anything as Longbeards, but I would rather get the actual models. Hopefully the metal ones, if they bring them back on Made to Order. If they don't, I would probably just get the more modern ones. But I do like the idea of Longbeards. They are good. Tartarsaurus puts a runesmith in with hand weapon and shield warriors, so they get the AP one, and I think they get flaming attacks as well. They get the... It's Armor Bane, I think they get, isn't it? From the runesmith. Armor Bane 2, I think. Yeah, I'm not sold on the miners at all. It's sad because they're some of my favourites. There is a lot of character in the old dwarf models, so I hope they bring quite a few of them back on made to order. Because I'm definitely going to buy pretty much everything they bring back for the dwarves is going to have a place in my collection, because I already need another gyrocopter. I need a flame cannon. I don't have one of those. I could do with a second bolt thrower for when I want to run double bolt thrower action, because they're so cheap, so it's worth it. I don't need any more cannons. Don't need any more organ guns unless I can source the original one with the spikes for a reasonable price, just to complete the collection, so I have one of each. I like to represent one of each generation of things. I don't want to have two of anything that look the same. I wouldn't want 2 plastic gyrocopters. I would like Slayers, obviously, Goblin Hewer, and let's see. Gyros seem to be dominant in other bat reps. Yes, gyrocopters are amazing. It's just the lack of them at the moment. So I may end up being really tempted to buy maybe 2 plastic ones. Even though it's going against my nature of having 2 of the same type, when I'd rather have 1 of each era, so they all look different. I may end up getting 2 plastic ones for the time being, so that I can run 3 for now. Because they answer a lot of the questions that the rest of the dwarf army can't. They've got speed, they can chase things down, they can finish off some of those units that are hiding with 1 wound left. They can chase them down and put wounds on them with shooting. They can charge things and do impact hits at long range. I could just convert one of them, because you do get a lot of bits in there, because it also makes the gyro bomber. So you can make one look a little bit different. So maybe I can do something with it. I do convert a lot of stuff for other armies, so I'm sure I could do something nice there. Be worth a go. I've got lots of bits of Caradron Overlords from Age of Sigmar as well, from those flying machines that might fit in. I could probably put something together that looks cool. The Grudge Pony as well. I'm hearing that that's going to be quite good. People in the know are telling me that that might be something worth taking in the dwarf army when that comes out, so I'm going to have to get one of those as well. My bank account is braced for impact, so I'm resisting all other frivolous purchases in the meantime, because there's going to be a lot of money dropped on dwarves. I don't need any more Brettonians now, so they're just sitting there until I get around to painting them all. And hopefully I will paint some units soon so I can get them on the table, because I did enjoy the game I played against them. I thought they played quite a fun game, the Brettonians. Obviously the knights got gunned down instantly, so that doesn't fill me with too much hope. But that is against a dwarf gun line, and the perfect thing for them to kill is probably a knight, a unit of knights. Except for these gosh darn chaos knights that make all their saves. But generally, knights are a good target for war machines. The anvil. The anvil is a tough one because it's ridiculously expensive, and some games it doesn't get to contribute at all because the enemy stays out of dispel range, and maybe stays out of range for my runes to be particularly effective as well. And if the enemy want to shut down the runes, they just have to dip in there, and with their level 4s, it's quite easy to shut down. So it's a problem. I like the anvil, but it's expensive. I could have cheaper dispelling heroes, who I would have to stack up runes of spell breaking on to give them a chance to stop the spells. And they can move out as well, move forward, but they have a shorter range. Only 18 inches instead of 24, and they're not the threat that the anvil is. I felt like putting the Rune of Fortitude on the anvil didn't really do that much, because it still ended up dying anytime it got into combat, pretty much. So I don't know whether I would take that again. It reduces the likelihood of certain units killing it. Anything that doesn't have super high strength is unlikely to kill it. But it's only got 3 attacks in combat, so it can't hold its own that much. sadly. What else? The Iron Drakes are fine. No issues with them, except for in this last game with the Trollhammer torpedoes, I kept rolling 1s. And actually, throughout most of the tournament, the torpedoes rolled 1s, but that's just on my dice rolling. That's not a slight against the unit. So Iron Drake's obviously very good. Competing with organ guns for the rare slots. You can take 2 of each, but you can't take more than that. You haven't got enough to take any more at all. You could take more Iron Drakes, but you'd just be increasing the unit size. You wouldn't be able to take another full unit of 5. You could just take like an extra few models in the unit, which might not be the worst idea if you've got points left over in rare. An extra few Iron Drakes for some more Drake guns makes them better at standing and shooting. More models in there. Potentially an idea. But then points are valuable. And let's see where all my points are going in this list. So characters, I'm only spending 460 out of 1,000. Most of those are on the anvil. The core, I've spent 501 points. I can funnel more of those into rangers though and out of the other units because the rangers are really good. I just need to use them better and not fail leadership tests with them so they don't die immediately every time. And maybe look into different roles for them. Stephen says, I've used the rune of Gromril on the anvil. 2+ re-rolling 1's armor saves is decent. Does adding an armor rune remove the native re-rolling 1's? I don't know. That's an interesting one. I'll have to get someone to clarify that one. But of course you can also use the rune on yourself if you think you're going to get charged to allow you to re-roll failed saves as well. And I've got 591 of 1,000 in special, which is mostly war machines and then the hammerers. And then rare, I'm up to 447 points out of 500 for the 2 Iron Drake units and 2 organ guns. So that's where the big competition is, the rare section. That's where you're going to run out if you're taking the cool stuff. And it's sad that the Iron Drakes and organ guns are some of the coolest, and I think the strongest units in the list as well. So there's some stiff competition in there. If other events come along with higher point levels, obviously that changes things. You can start taking different numbers of things. There's lots of cool stuff in special, but the problem is an expensive unit of hammerers and an expensive unit of iron breakers. Is that too much in one list? Can the enemy just avoid them too easily because they're slow? And does that give you not enough shooting to draw the enemy to you? It's a tough balancing act. But I'm going to have a less war machine intensive list next time I use the dwarves. I'm also going to be trying out my vampire count soon as well, just for a bit of variety. It's not going to be the horribly screamy list though, because I don't have any terrorgeists, I don't even have any banshees. I've got a mortis engine, and I've got loads of infantry and some cavalry, and I've got a model that I used to use as a Vargulf as well. I've got a corpse cart, I've got crypt horrors. I'm just looking at the cabinet over my shoulder now, see if I've got anything else. Dire wolves. Yes, I've got loads of cool stuff. I've got bats, vampires, necromancers. So I'll be able to put a fun list together. And then, of course, I'll get on with painting the Brettonians sometime soon as well, so you can see them in action as well, which is going to be exciting. And then all that obviously is going to get put on hold when the dwarves are released, because I'll be spending £1 billion on them and bankrupting myself and then painting them until my fingers fall off, probably, to get them ready. Yeah, it's exciting times for dwarves because the book's coming soon and the wave of releases. Not exciting times in terms of power level on the table. I think they've still got some issues. But the other dwarf list that did better at this event, obviously that was significantly less shooty than mine. You know what, let's look at that list right now actually before I go. Just before we wrap the video up. So that had a BSB with Master Rune of Grungni on it. A runesmith who's got loads of runes of spell breaking, which is something that I've considered. There is a unit of dwarf warriors with great weapons. And Rune of Courage, which is immune to terror and fear. Another unit of dwarves with great weapons. And a small unit of dwarves with great weapons. So 3 great weapon units, 69 breakers, a gyrocopter, 16 hammerers, so yeah, loads of fighter units, and then 2 units of 10 iron drakes. with Trollhammer torpedoes and Cinderblast bombs. So loads of fighting close combat units. So the enemy, what's encouraging them to come close here? The Iron Drakes aren't long range. So yeah, that's giving me something to think about then, because this army did win games at the event. So maybe a more combat-oriented dwarf list could actually work. I could run something fairly similar to this. It's worth a go. I'll try something different next time. And thanks for everyone that's tuned in throughout this entire very long live stream. We've had 5 very spicy, succulent, juicy games of the old world. And there's going to be more to come on this channel. Non-stop old world action, as well as what other game systems I'm attending tournaments for. There will be more Kings of War, more Dead Zone, and more Age of Sigmar as well. Especially with Age of Sigmar 4 coming out soon, so it's going to be spicy. Stephen says, just checked, and I think you still keep the reroll ones on armor if you add armor runes. That's nice. Very nice indeed. So, don't forget to check out all the links in the description. Don't forget to like the video, obviously. Check out all the social media shenanigans. There's a Facebook group, Discord server with an old world section in there as well. And obviously, if you think these videos are highly entertaining and educational and informative, why not pledge your entire life savings on Patreon or PayPal as well, which is linked down below. And that will then be used to build up the gyrocopter fund, so I can buy multiple gyrocopters instead of just one, like a peasant. How about that? Sounds like a good idea to me. Why have life savings when you could get me more gyrocopters? Why indeed? And a last look at the poll before we go. The organ gun is still in the lead with 56% of the vote. And the grudge thrower still loitering at the bottom there with 9%. But it's picked up a bit as time's gone on. The cannon, second last, not surprising. The bolt thrower getting a decent number. That's definitely got a place. Organ gun, though, is the spiciest one, in my opinion. Just a shame it's competing with Iron Drakes. Okay. Yes, Ratty, Flight of the Gyrocopters, coming soon, maybe. So, thanks for watching everybody, and all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.